we present Dixon of Dock Green, with David Calder as PC George Dixon and Hamish Clark as PC Andy Crawford. Dramatised by Sue Rodwell from the television screenplay by Ted Willis. Episode 3, The Captain.
Evening, all. I'm a bit late today. I was having a chinwag with PC Tubb in the canteen. Didn't notice the time. We were reminiscing, that's the word. All the characters we've come up against in Dock Green, and there've been a few, I can tell you, good and bad. You meet all sorts on the beat. It's a pity you have to meet some of them on a cold, dark morning after a very long night shift.
Hey, stop!
All I was wanting was a good breakfast and an even better sleep.
You two, wait!
Oh, hang on, Andy. Looks as if we're needed.
Oh, I was hoping if we ignored him, he'd go away.
Are you both deaf?
I'm sorry, sir. How can we help?
I've been robbed.
Calm down. Get your breath.
Murray, isn't it? Murray Green?
Don't shine that thing in my eyes.
Sorry.
Do I know you?
PC Dixon. You probably don't remember me.
No, I don't.
You say you've been robbed.
If I get my hands on whoever did it, his life won't be worth living.
Where did this robbery take place, sir?
My house! My own home! Honest people aren't safe anymore. I don't know what we pay you lot for.
To do our job. And the sooner we can make a start, the better.
It's taken all my best silver. Clean me out.
Did you hear any noise?
I wasn't at home, was I? I was over at Newmarket. Had a ruddy awful day yesterday. Nothing but favourites coming in. I paid out a fortune.
What time did you get home?
About 20 minutes ago, and this is what I walk in on.
Well, at least you didn't walk in on the burglar.
Well, I wish I had. I'd have knocked him into next week, I can tell you.
We'll need a list of all the missing items, sir.
He's even pinched the cigar box I got from the round table. 20 ounces of solid silver, presented by Alderman Mayhew. Big cheese, he is.
Have you noticed any strangers about in the last few days?
What, case in the joint, you mean? No. Don't suppose you dot'll get anything back for me?
We'll do our best.
No sign of anyone outside.
Well, he'll be long gone.
Got in through the kitchen window.
Oh, I could have told you that. There's a ruddy great hole in the glass.
Trickling brown paper on the pane and a quick tap, then our laddie reaches in for the latch.
Sounds like an old hand.
Oh, I need a drink. Won't offer you one. Good God. He's helped himself to my whiskey.
Are you sure?
Of course I'm sure. I hadn't even opened the bottle yet. Single malt. And he's used one of my best glasses.
Has something been taken from this desk, Mr. Green?
No.
Are you sure?
Quite sure.
Because it looks to me as if the lock on this drawer's been forced.
Well, nothing's missing.
It seems to be the only drawer with a lock.
If you'd leave it alone.
Did you keep something special in there, sir?
Cash, maybe?
No. Takings go straight into the night safe soon as I get back from any racecourse, whatever hour it is. You can check my books.
We've no need to do that, sir.
It's all above board. You people always think bookmakers must be up to no good. Well, I don't hold with runners, illegal betting, nothing like that.
No, sir, I'm sure you don't. Well, there isn't much more we can do now. We'll report the break-in to CID. They'll be dealing with it.
See, that's the trouble with CID.
What is?
Well, we always do the donkey work and they swan in and take the glory.
Well, I wouldn't call it donkey work, lad. Good, honest, hard graft, more like.
Yeah, but they're the ones who get a pat on the back from the chief constable when the case is solved.
Is that why you're so keen to get into CID? For a pat on the back?
No, but I wouldn't mind a bit of the glory.
Well, if that's what you're after, you better go back to Murray's. Impress D.I. Cherry when he turns up.
Not much chance of that.
Well, you'll miss breakfast in the canteen, of course. Ooh, nice plate of bacon, egg, fried bread. Ooh, mushrooms, if we're lucky. Oh, but it's your choice.
Yeah, well, if you put it that way, there's not much choice. I'll go for the breakfast.
Good lad. And put a plate over mine, will you? Keep it warm for me.
Why? Where are you off to?
Criminal records. Something about our burglar's M.O. rang a bell.
The treacle and brown paper?
No. Helping himself to the best drink in the house.
Andy!
Hello, Tom. I didn't know you were on nights this week.
I'm not. Thought I'd get her a bit early for once. New boy shows willing. Cheer up, Sergeant Flint. George not with you?
Doesn't seem to be.
What have you got there? Mushrooms?
Oi, leave them alone. I earned this breakfast.
Hard night.
Another break-in. Glenside Avenue.
Did you catch him?
Nope.
Whew. That makes 6 burglaries this month. How many have been on your beat?
Enough.
Flint's not going to be pleased.
That man seems to think we can be everywhere at once.
George will put him right.
I'm perfectly capable of standing up to Flint myself.
All right. You still on for the pally on Saturday?
I'm not sure.
It'll cheer you up. Lonnie Donegan's top of the bill.
It's a bit near the end of the month, Tom. I'm not sure I can afford yet another Saturday night out.
I'll cover the drinks.
I'll stand him around. If we go.
Come on, Andy. You and Mary, me and... Well, I fancy bringing along that blonde from the flower shop.
She's a bit out your league, isn't she?
Maybe, but does no harm to ask.
Tom, you've been nicking my breakfast.
Andy wouldn't let me.
It's probably cold now.
As long as the tea's still warm. Yeah, lovely. Peg knows just how I like it.
I hear there was another break-in on your beat, George.
Yeah, Glenside Avenue. Maury Green's luxury villa.
I don't think I've come across him yet.
Well, you will. Local bookmaker. Your dad and I had a run-in or two with Maury's mum before the war. She used to have a cockle store up near Felton Dock. Took bets on the side. Ask your dad. He'll tell you all about Bessie Green.
Well, it doesn't take much to get Dad reminiscing.
Any luck in records?
Well, maybe. There was this character, John Wilde, known by one and all as the Captain. He fancied himself as a bit of a gentleman burglar. Mostly worked over Shadwell way, Flint's old patch. But he did a couple of jobs in Dock Green.
You think he's got something to do with these break-ins?
Well, the Captain had this habit. After he'd helped himself to the best silver in the house, he'd help himself to the best drink as well. When Flint finally nabbed him, he had a cut-glass decanter in one hand and a double brandy in the other. He offered the Sarge a drink.
Sounds like a cool customer.
Well, he was, by all accounts. I never met him, but when Murray mentioned the drink, I remembered Flint telling a tale or two.
And you think he's gone back to his old ways?
Well, looks like it. I checked the notes on the other break-ins, and one old lady in Seymour Road thought someone had been at the brandy.
Do we know where this character is now?
Well, he's been in and out of the scrubs over the years, but according to the files, he's free at the moment. Last address in Nelson Road. I thought I'd pay him a call.
Well, no.
No, it's all right, lad. You get off home to bed. You look all in.
George is right. A man your age needs his sleep.
Haven't you got work to do?
All right. I'm going.
What was that about?
Nothing. You know what Tom's like. Just out of police college and thinks he knows it all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he reminds me of another young copper when he was new to Dock Green.
Who? What, you mean... Rubbish.
Well, I've not said another word.
Are we going to see what the captain has to say for himself?
Welcome to my hovel, gentlemen. What can I do for you this fine but unpleasantly early morning?
Well, we just wanted to ask you a few questions.
Well, of course you do. Why else would you be here? Let me clear my poor solitary chair for you, Constable. I'm afraid the young man will have to perch on my bed.
I'll stand, thank you.
A native of Scotland, land of Calvin oatcakes and sulphur, as the great Sidney Smith had it.
Can you tell us where you were last night, Mr. Wilde?
Mr. Wilde, how very formal, almost respectful. I'm no relation, of course.
Relation?
Oscar, the greatest wit that
Your
I...
whereabouts?
No,
About 8 o'clock last night and 4 a.m.?
I'm sorry. Business, of course. Well, from 8 till 10, I was down at the Golden Lion. Sally, the barmaid, she'll vouch for me. I assume it is an alibi I require.
And after 10?
Here, tucked up in bed. I'm afraid there's no one to vouch for that.
Did you pass Glenside Avenue on your way home?
Oh, hardly. The denizens of Glenside are a little outside my current milieu.
Your current what?
Well, as you might guess from these lowly surroundings, I'm down on my luck, hardly likely to keep company with anyone from that part of Dock Green.
Well, unless it wasn't company you were after.
I take it there was a break-in at Glenside Avenue. And you think I'm the villain of the piece. I wonder why.
Because the villain helped himself to a glass of whiskey.
My old habit, as you obviously know, and that's reason enough to damn me.
Do you know Maury Green?
Only by reputation. I have many sins, Constable, but gambling isn't one of them. The child of avarice and parent of despair.
Well, you don't collect illegal bets for Maury in the Golden Lion or any other pub.
I'm a little old to be a bookies runner, surely.
Well, I've met older. Where were you on the 4th of this month, Mr. Wilde?
The 4th? Dare one ask why?
An elderly widow surprised a burglar in her home about 9 o'clock on the evening of the 4th.
Well, I'm sure if she'd been able to identify me, I'd be down at the station.
But she didn't see the man. Locked herself in the bathroom and screamed very loudly. All she was certain about afterwards was that he'd helped himself to some brandy.
Of course. Well, let me see. The 4th. If that was a Tuesday, yes, this time I have an alibi. I was in the Black Horse. Any number of my drinking companions will swear to that.
I'm sure they will.
Do you mind if we take a look round your flat?
Flat, hardly that, I'm afraid. I do mind. As a matter of fact, I mind very much. Privacy is the last refuge of the impoverished, to mangle poor Dr. Johnson.
If you've nothing to hide.
Ah, that's always a justification. Ah, very well. Do as you like. The swag is in the cupboard, in a box marked swag.
I don't think we'll find anything here, Constable. The captain's too old a hand to keep stolen goods on the premises.
You're quite right, of course, if there were any stolen goods. Oh, I don't suppose I can convince you I'm completely innocent.
We'll want to speak to you again.
I'm sure you will. I turned down dear Noel's invitation to Cap Ferrar for the season, so here's where you'll find me, Constable, awaiting my fate.
Quite a character, the captain.
And nobody's fool.
Mind you, I didn't understand half of what he was saying.
Well, I think that's the idea, Andy. Blind us with fancy words. Put us off the scent.
So you think he's the one we want?
I'll bet my pension on it.
But what about his alibi for the 4th?
As Flint always says, alibis are like pie crusts.
Pie crusts?
Made to be broken.
Oh.
But I didn't manage to break the captain's alibi. He had too many friends who didn't seem to want him back in prison. Or he really was in the Black Horse that night. Still, our little chat seemed to work in one way, because the burglaries stopped. Mind you, that meant we weren't going to catch him in the act. Didn't please D.I. Cherry or Sergeant Flint one little bit. And they weren't the only ones.
I want to know what you're doing to get my silver back.
All we can, sir.
What does that mean?
We've circulated a description of the stolen items to jewellers and pawnbrokers and known fences. If the burglar tries to sell anything, we'll hear about it.
Is that all you've done?
No, sir. CID are working on the case. If you'd like a word with Detective Inspector Cherry...
Cherry? No, thanks. He'd probably try and blame it on me. Anything to make life easier.
Well, if that's all, sir, I do have some work
Well,
here.
what about suspects? You must have some ideas. Names.
Well, I'm afraid I can't tell you anything more at the moment.
Why not? I'm the victim here, you know. Just give me some names, I'll go and sort them out.
I'm sure you would.
Well, what do you care so long as I find your man for you?
If you don't mind my saying, you seem very exercised about this.
I've been burgled. What do you expect?
Well, none of the other victims have dropped by the station every day.
Well, maybe if they had, it'd get you lot off your backsides. And I'll be back tomorrow.
Before you go, sir,
What?
the list you gave CID, does it include everything that was stolen?
Of course it does.
Nothing you haven't mentioned?
Stop trying to be clever and just do your job, Constable.
And a good evening to you too, sir.
Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. Hang down your head, then cry. Hang down your head, Tom.
What? Dry up before you drive me potty.
Oh, sorry. I just bought the 45. Can't get it out of my head. What do you and George chat about on the beat?
I don't know. This and that.
I met her on the mountain. Sorry. I was thinking of taking Maureen to that restaurant we found in Ilford. The one where Mary had scampi, remember?
I do. Cost me an arm and a leg.
Wondered if you and Mary wanted to come along.
Sorry, Tom. I can't run to those prices twice in a lifetime.
My treat.
We can't go on letting you treat us.
Well, it's not me, it's Gran. She will keep sending cheques. She'd be hurt if I didn't cash them.
I wish I had a grandmother like that.
Oh, come on, Andy. Maureen won't go alone with me. Thinks I'm up to no good.
Which one is Maureen? The girl from the florist or the waitress?
The barmaid at the Quays.
Oh, I don't believe it. If you've got any energy left, check that gate, will you? Make sure it's chained and padlocked properly.
Yes, sir. All present and correct, sir.
Belt up.
So, the restaurant?
I'll talk to Mary.
So, what's George like to work with?
He's just fine. Why?
Well, when you go into CID, I reckon we'll join forces.
You and George?
We'd make a good team.
I doubt I'll ever make it into CID.
Of course you will.
Not for a good few years.
Well, what's that?
What?
Thought I saw something over there. In that garden. Someone running through the hedge.
Anything?
No.
No sign of anyone this side.
Might have been someone running across to the common. At the back. Hard to see in this light.
It looks as if no one's home. No one answered the bell.
Andy, shine your torch on that window.
Oh, no.
Break-in number 7, by the looks of it.
Ah, the charming young Scotsman. Do come in.
We'd like to ask you some questions about...
Oh, Bringer, who's this? You must introduce me before we have our chat.
PC Carr.
Mr. Wilde, have you been out this evening?
No, nursing a bit of a cold, isn't it? Trying to keep warm. You wouldn't have a shilling for the meter, by any chance?
You haven't been anywhere near Willis Street tonight?
Oh, dear, this sounds all too familiar. No, I haven't been in the vicinity of Willis Street for quite some time. I think 2 or 3 months ago I did pass by.
A house in Willis Street has been broken into.
And naturally, you want to question me about it. I do admire your persistence, Constable.
When we got into the house, we found an open bottle of gin in the sitting room.
Gin?
And an empty glass.
I do hope there was tonic.
You tell me.
Constable, Carr?
Sir?
Please, don't pry among my things while your colleague is keeping me occupied. It's rather transparent.
That's a nice-looking picture you've got on the wall.
Caravaggio, St. Francis in ecstasy. Only a cheap print, I'm afraid.
Do you mind if I take a closer look?
I can assure you, if it were genuine, it would be in the hands of a dealer and I'd be enjoying dinner at the Savoy. I most certainly did not take it from a house in Willis Street. Were paintings stolen?
We're not sure what was taken yet. The owners are away.
Because I think if you remind yourself of my modus operandi, I only took small, easily transportable objects.
What? Like this?
It was an exquisite carriage clock. 18th century, I think. French. Where on earth did it come from?
Why don't you tell us, sir?
Well, I would, if I'd ever seen it before in my life.
Then what was it doing under all the rubbish on that chair?
You've done what?
I had to arrest him.
Why?
Well, for one thing, he refused to answer any questions.
You think he's more likely to talk banged up in a police cell?
George...
Oh, you should have talked to me first, lad.
There wasn't time. I wanted to get hold of him before he had the chance to get rid of whatever he'd pinched. And I did.
Well, you don't even know if this carriage clock came from the Willis Road house.
Not for sure, but...
And once someone like the captain clams up...
You know, I'm perfectly capable of making an arrest all by myself.
Of course you are, Andy. It's just... I've had a bit more experience dealing with old lags like the captain.
But, George...
They need careful handling if you're going to get anything out of them.
He's confessed to everything.
He's what?
Every single burglary. Admitted the lot. D.I. Cherry's coming over in about half an hour. Wants to hear it from the horse's mouth, Flint said. That's why I'm still here and not home in bed. Cherry wants me to sit in on the interview. I'm in, George. George, CID. I'm in for sure.
So, Mr. Wilde, you carried out all these break-ins we've been having?
Every single one.
And you helped yourself to a drink each time?
Of course. My signature, Constable, and you were clever enough to spot it.
Well, you must have known somebody would eventually.
Well, obviously my mistake was to underestimate the constabulary.
And did you think if you were caught you could talk your way out of it?
Possibly. Or perhaps it was a habit I just couldn't break. For a few minutes I could sit in agreeable surroundings in a comfortable armchair, sampling the best alcohol that particular house had to offer, and imagine myself in quite a different world.
And that's what you did at Murray Green's?
It is.
Before or after you stole his silver?
Does that matter?
You can remember what silver you took?
That nice Scottish police constable has been through the list with me.
He gave you a list?
Yes, and we went through it together and ticked all the items, and I really don't see what the problem is. You wanted to catch a thief. You've caught a thief.
The list won't have included what you stole from Murray Green's desk.
Won't it?
The drawer you forced.
Yes, of course. The drawer.
What did you take out of it?
I really can't remember.
You don't know what I'm talking about, do you? Because you were never at Murray's. Why confess to something you didn't do?
I'm admitting nothing, you understand, but perhaps the prospect of a waterproof cell and 3 square meals a day seems preferable to a damp room and constant hunger.
Where'd you get that carriage clock?
I wish I knew.
What do you mean?
I mean that until your colleagues produced that particular rabbit out of the hat, I'd never seen it before.
You saying they planted it?
Be silent always when you doubt your sense.
All right, well, D.I. Cherry wants to... George, is something wrong?
No.
Only I didn't expect to see you down here.
Well, there were 1 or 2 questions I wanted to ask Mr. Wilde.
Ah, well, there are a lot more questions D.I. Cherry wants to ask him. So if you're finished...
Well, I've got some more. But not for the captain.
I hope you've got some good news for me this time.
We've a man in custody.
Miracles will never cease.
Would you mind if I came in for a moment, sir?
I haven't got the time. I've got to be at Lingfield by lunch.
Well, I can ask them on the doorstep if you prefer.
Fine, but make it snappy.
Well, it's about that empty drawer in your desk.
That again?
Whatever it was in that drawer, our burglar thought it was worth pinching, and he's probably explaining just why to Detective Inspector Cherry right now. I thought you'd like to give me your version.
You better come in.
Thank you, sir.
They were betting slips, that's all. A drawer full of used betting slips.
Bets you've taken at race meetings.
Of course.
Or on the street.
Now, that's not legal.
But why keep old betting slips?
Because some of them owed me money, all right? You could say I was just extending them a bit of credit.
There's a lot of credit.
I don't deal in chicken feed.
And these punters, they'd be councillors and aldermen and the like, would they? People with a bit of influence in Dock Green.
I don't like your tone, Constable.
They'd be grateful to you, I should think. Willing to do you a favour or two in return.
That's slander.
I'd like a list, sir. Every name on those slips.
Why?
Well, either our burglar intends to make use of them himself, or, and I'd take a bet on it, his name would be on that list you're going to give me.
You said you'd arrested the burglar. Why'd you need
You
all
can
these...
write the list here or down at the station.
All right, all right. Coppers. You got a pen?
No, George, you can't do this to me.
You wouldn't want to arrest the wrong man.
He confessed. Cherry's already charged him.
He's lying. Now look at the list Murray gave me.
Just because the captain's name's not on it doesn't mean he's not the burglar.
Why would he bother to steal betting slips?
I don't know. Maybe he wanted to try a spot of blackmail himself.
That's not the captain's style. Read the list, Andy.
If I've brought in the wrong man, Cherry's never going to let me forget it.
5th name from the bottom.
He'll never... I don't believe it.
Neither did I. But then it all started to make sense.
So, the captain was our man.
Well, he certainly confessed.
Then it's CID for you, Andy. Let's have a drink on it. Celebrate.
We're on duty.
Well, We'll have to go out this evening. Make a night of it.
This is a nice flat you've got yourself.
Oh, not bad. I keep meaning to invite you and Mary over for a meal.
That's an expensive settee. Real leather, isn't it?
And that radiogram looks brand new.
What's this all about?
How much do you owe Maury Green?
Maury? Oh, the bookmaker. I don't know him.
Well, he reckons over 100 nicker. But he's not sure because he hasn't got the betting slips anymore.
He's lying. And you can't prove otherwise.
Because you burnt the slips.
Look, Andy, you know me.
Did you look out for suitable houses on your beat, then go back later?
I don't have to listen to this.
You set things up, so if anyone got suspicious, you could put the blame on the captain. You didn't see anyone running away from that house. You just wanted to point the finger.
Oh, this is stupid.
Where did you get the carriage clock?
You what?
You planted it.
Come on. All those houses full of stuff begging to be pinched. Any copper would do the same, given half a chance.
I should knock your block off!
Get him off me!
George, he's not worth it.
You can't prove a thing.
So where do you keep it, eh? Hey, you can't have fenced it all. Where are you keeping the bed on the water?
What is your problem?
Bent coppers like you.
Now, what's this? A grateful gift to Morris Green from Doc Green Round Table.
Look, no reason why you two shouldn't get a share. Just tell me how much...
Shut up! Thomas Carr, I'm arresting you on a charge of burglary. You don't have to say anything. Anything you do say... Carr tried to put his uniform on to go to the station, but I wasn't having that. They say there's one rotten apple in every barrel. He was the first I'd ever come across, and I wanted him to be the last. Well, it's never easy for an ex-copper in jail, and Carr's got 5 years to find that out. The captain, well... Last I'd heard, he'd managed to get himself another short stretch in the scrubs. Hope the food's to his liking. And Andy, he was right. D.I. Cherry wasn't at all pleased. It was a while before the lad got a second chance at CID. But that's another story. Evening, all.
In Dixon of Dock Green, George Dixon was played by David Calder, and PC Andy Crawford by Hamish Clark. Maury and Tom Carr were played by Jonathan Taffler and Jonathan Gunning, and the captain was played by Bill Wallace. Dixon of Dock Green was dramatised for radio by Sue Rodwell.
We present Donald Wolfett, James McKechnie and Norman Shelley with Harcourt Williams and Austin Trevor in Libel by Edward Wool. It is a spring afternoon in London, the year 1927. The court of Mr. Justice Tuttington at the Royal Courts of Justice, King's Bench Division, is in full session and about to begin the trial of an action for libel. For the plaintiff, Sir Wilfrid Kelling, KCMP. For the defendants, Mr. Thomas Foxley, KC. There's a plan of the courtroom on page 44 of the Christmas edition of the Radio Times. Page 44. You, the listeners, are to form the jury.
The jury are sworn in the case of Lutton and the Daily Gazette.
Mr. William Bale, the junior counsel for the plaintiff, has risen to open the case formally by reading the pleadings.
May it please your lordship, members of the jury. The plaintiff, Sir Mark Lutton-Bart, by his statement of claim, is claiming damages from the defendants, the proprietors, printers, and publishers of the newspaper called the Daily Gazette, in respect of a libel alleged to have been published of and concerning him in the said newspaper. The defendants in their defense state that insofar as the said words consist of allegations of fact, they are true in substance and in fact. And insofar as they consist of expressions of opinions, they are fair comment made in good faith and without malice upon the said facts, which are matters of public interest. On those pleas issues are joined, and those are the issues which you have to try.
May it please you, my lord. Members of the jury, in this case, I appear with my learned junior, Mr. Bale, for the plaintiff, Sir Mark Lutton. And the defendants, who are the proprietors of that well-known, I might almost say that notorious newspaper, the Daily Gazette, have the advantage of being represented by my learned friends, Mr. Foxley and Mr. Hemsby. It is an action of the very greatest public and private importance. In view of that most unusual importance, I deliberately propose to let the facts speak for themselves at this stage. You shall learn the story from the witnesses, not from me. And I shall defer to a later stage the comment, which I have no doubt you will consider a libel of this character so flagrantly provokes and so abundantly justifies. The plaintiff is Sir Mark Lutton, the third baronet of his name, the fortunate inheritor of one of the finest and oldest properties in Norfolk. The short question in this case is whether the plaintiff is entitled to that rank, that name, that estate. I might go further and say you will have to decide whether Sir Mark is entitled to be the husband of his wife or the father of her child. Let me read you the libel which gives rise to this action. The paragraph is headed Political Imposture and continues. The legislator recently returned to the House of Commons as Sir Mark Lutton, Bart, MP, is not a baronet, not even a Lutton, and can hardly be accurately described as a member of Parliament, as he secured his return by practicing on the electorate the same deliberate fraud that he practiced on his wife. Now remember, members of the jury, that those terrible allegations were published in the columns of the Daily Gazette and must have reached almost everyone identified with its enormous circulation.
Did they appear in some so-called society paragraph?
No, my lord. They appeared with special prominence in a paragraph on their main page. The jury will, of course, have copies of the paper later.
I see. Thank you, Sir Wilfred.
Members of the jury, I'm not going to insult you by explaining the libelous imputations conveyed by those words. You may ask yourselves what motive could underlie them, and you will perhaps not be surprised to learn that Sir Mark had successfully advocated politics of a creed opposed to those intermittently promulgated by the defendant newspaper when conducive to their own circulation.
I thought my learned friend, Sir Wilfred Kelling, informed us he was proposing to let the facts speak for themselves.
I am flattered by my friend Mr. Foxley's attention to my observations. Yet even so, members of the jury, you may like to remember that if Sir Mark Lutton is not Sir Mark Lutton, his child Ronald will never be Sir Ronald Lutton, and those broad acres and family dignities would pass to another, Captain Gerald Lutton. Let me say just one word in reference to that gentleman, members of the jury. At first impression, you might expect me to call Captain Lutton in support of my case. He, at least, should be reasonably familiar with and certain of his own cousin's identity. Things are not always what they seem. He is, I understand, in court. Ah, yes, there he is. But I tell you frankly, I shall not call him. It may be that you may have the fallacious surprise of seeing him called by my learned friend, Mr. Foxley. I hope you may. I should very much like to ask Captain Lutton some questions in reference to the history of this litigation.
I'm much obliged for my learned friend Sir Wilfred's anticipations of my case, however intelligent.
Well, members of the jury, we must wait and see if the defense dare to do so. But as far as my case is concerned, I shall call the plaintiff, Sir Mark Lutton, and I shall then formally produce his nearest relations in support. First and foremost, and naturally, his wife, Lady Lutton. And then there may, of course, be others. But you will not forget that the defendants have what is known as justified their allegations. That is to say, they have come here prepared to prove their truth or to pay for their recklessness. What evidence they may have to support such literally unprecedented suggestions, I know not. But I do not envy my learned friend the task he has undertaken in endeavoring to sustain them in this court and before an English jury.
Mr. Mark Lutton,
Testament in your right hand. You swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
The evidence you shall give.
The evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
You are Sir Mark Lutton, 3rd Baronet of Ingworth Hall in the county of Norfolk.
That is so.
You were educated at Eton and Sandhurst, and thence obtained a commission in the Rifle Brigade.
Yes.
I think you went to France with your battalion in August 1914.
Yes.
Then you were wounded and taken prisoner at the Battle of the Marne.
I was.
What wounds did you sustain at that battle, Sir Mark?
I was shot through both thighs and badly shell-shocked.
I believe the farm in which you lay wounded was set on fire by the enemy's guns, and you were nearly burnt to death before you were rescued by the enemy.
Very nearly.
What effect did that terrible experience have on you?
Those few hours that summer afternoon turned my hair grey, almost white, as you see it now.
Yes. What happened after you were taken prisoner?
I was in a German hospital for 3 months, and then sent to an officers' prison camp at Hobheim.
When were you released?
I was never released. I escaped in October 1918. I reached the Belgian frontier 3 days before the armistice.
Right, sir. And then?
Then I made my way fairly easily to the English lines and was invalided home.
What did you do then?
I retired from the army. I had a long rest cure. After 6 months or so, I was as well as I suppose I shall ever be, and I married my wife.
You have recently entered public life and were last autumn elected Member of Parliament for the Raynham Division of Norfolk.
Yes.
We don't want to introduce politics, but is it right to say that your party does not enjoy the support of the Gazette?
Not even in its most versatile phases.
Yes, yes. What is the present state of your health?
Oh, subject to a bit of a limp, I can indulge in any reasonable physical effort.
Now, what about mental effort?
Oh, I suppose I mustn't say too much about that. I don't complain, you know. Apart from memory.
What of your memory?
I have practically no recollection at all of events or persons before my imprisonment.
We shall hear what the doctors say about it, but roughly they attribute it to shock. Shell shock and the shock of your experience in that fire on the Marne.
Yes, I don't doubt they're right.
Now, I want to turn for a moment to the libel, which is the subject of this action.
Yes?
The jury have heard the allegations of which you complain, Sir Mark. Is there a word of truth in them?
They're an infamous lie.
Has anyone else any right to your title, estates, or position?
No, not a soul in the world.
Has any member of your family at any time displayed any difficulty in identifying you?
Not one. Until this paragraph appeared.
Apart from you and your son, who would come into your property and title?
My cousin, Gerald Lutton.
On what terms have you been?
Oh, most friendly terms until about 18 months ago.
What caused the rupture?
A certain poor type of Canadian was at the same camp with me. About 2 years ago, he turned up at Ingworth Hall and began trying to blackmail me by asking for...
Really, my lord, I'm most reluctant to interrupt my friend or his witness, but aren't they going rather beyond the limits of relevance?
I'm always anxious to oblige my friend, my lord. But, Sir Mark, we won't go into the blackmail incident at present.
You're very well.
I'm much obliged to my learned friend. I know that he's always most
The
anxious.
rules of evidence are really rules of brevity. We must try for our own sakes to observe them.
Now, I think I've only one more question to put you, Sir Mark.
Yes?
How did you first learn of this libelous publication?
Oh, I had dozens of copies sent me by friends and constituents, but I first read it in my own copy of the paper. You see, I happen to be a registered reader of the Gazette. I don't agree with its views, but I've always liked all sorts of fiction.
Thank you, Sir Mark.
So you've always liked all sorts of fiction, have you?
Yes, Mr. Foxley, I said so.
You've indulged that liking to a rather abnormal extent, haven't you?
Oh, what do you mean?
I am suggesting that ever since November 1918, you've indulged in the unscrupulous fiction of being an English baronet.
That's an infamous libel, Mr. Foxley, for which your clients will have to pay.
Of being the lawful owner of the Lutton estate.
Another damnable lie, a damnable lie.
Come, Sir Mark.
And most unscrupulous fiction of all, of being entitled to woo and marry your wife.
My wife doesn't require the protection of the gutter press.
On my instructions, I am not so sure.
Your instructions?
Now, before we go any further, I want to be quite clear that you don't wish to suggest to the jury that any physical or mental disability, prison or escape experiences could possibly make you believe you were someone other than yourself?
No, I do not.
You sustained no injury that could make Frank Welney honestly believe he was Sir Mark Lutton?
Of course not.
Whom did you say, Mr. Foxley?
Frank Welney, my lord.
Who is Frank Welney?
If your lordship would allow me to explore that in my own way.
Certainly, Mr. Foxley.
You, Sir Mark, at least have heard of a man called Frank Welney.
Certainly.
He was a Canadian officer.
I believe so.
Did you ever know him?
Yes. I was at the same prison camp in Germany.
So I believe. For how long?
Nearly 4 years.
And when did you last see him?
Let me see. It would be...
Yes, well, now let me try and help you. Did you shave yourself this morning?
Yes? Why?
Didn't you see him then?
What do you mean?
My lord, it isn't necessary for my friend to be so deliberately offensive in the form of his question.
I must assume that Mr. Foxley is only cross-examining from his instructions, which of course would involve... Well, I think you must let him pursue his own line, Sir Wilfrid.
I'm much obliged to my learned friend for his attempt to assist me to conduct my case. And now, Sir Mark, I will call you that for the moment.
Oh, thank you.
I am suggesting that you are Frank Welney and that he is you.
It is a shameful lie without any foundation at all.
And that because you are Welney, you know what became of Lutton.
I refuse to answer that suggestion.
The jury will perhaps hear of a number of actions committed by Welney, which I suggest were committed by you because you are, in fact, Welney.
It is a vile fabrication.
Oh, then it would be a waste of time for me to put them to you specifically. You would deny them all.
Naturally. I've sworn to tell the truth.
I will ask your lordship to make a note of that reply.
Certainly.
In the interest of time, I think I can dispense with a very large number of those other questions.
I am sure the jury will appreciate any condensation which has that result.
If your lordship please. Now tell me, Sir Mark, who was Frank Welney?
He described himself as a captain in the Canadian infantry.
When did you first see him?
When I was at Hobheim prison camp. He arrived a few months later.
And when do you say you saw him last?
When we escaped together in November 1918. We got parted.
Got parted?
Yes.
Now, why did you get parted?
We missed each other in the dark.
You missed each other in the dark, yes. Well, is that really all you can tell me of how you separated?
Absolutely all. Very easy to get lost in the dark. The other fellows had got hold of civilian clothes, but I hadn't. I was in uniform, so we had to move by night.
Now, did anything happen between you and Welney before you missed each other?
No. What do you mean? What could have happened?
The jury may hear later what could have happened. Was anyone else in the party of escape?
Yes, a man called Buckingham.
And who was he?
He called himself a Canadian officer.
Oh, called himself a Canadian officer?
Yes.
I gather that to one so thoroughly imbued with the traditions of the English baronetage, his credentials were not impressive.
No, they were not.
Well, then, that was the party. Sir Mark Lutton, Buckingham, and Welney.
Yes, myself and the Canadians.
And when did you start?
In October 1918.
Where from?
Hobheim.
Where did you separate?
On the Belgian frontier.
When?
November 1918, about a month after we started.
How did you separate?
I've told you, we lost each other in the dark.
Which got lost first?
Buckingham went off first to forage for food. He didn't come back.
I see, yes. That left Lutton and Welney together. What happened then?
Welney went off to look for Buckingham. He never came back either.
Oh, both got lost that same fatal night.
Or killed?
Ah, killed. That was it, was it?
I don't know. I only mean Welney. I know Buckingham is alive, and so do you.
Who do you say was killed, Welney or Lutton?
I will not answer that question. You know that I am alive.
Oh, yes, I know you're alive. Well, now, did you make any inquiries at the time about your, shall we say, mislaid companions?
Yes, of course I did.
And you've never heard from either of them since?
Not from Welney.
Do you think that they're dead or alive?
I know Buckingham is alive.
What of Welney?
Oh, I've no doubt he is dead.
Why?
Well, I'm sure I should have heard from him if he'd been alive.
Would it be a relief to you to learn that he was alive?
I tell you it's impossible. Of course, I don't want anyone dead.
I wonder. Perhaps. Well, we shall see. Now you've told us that you know Buckingham is alive.
Yes.
How is that?
He suddenly turned up at Ingworth Park 2 years ago, and he tried to blackmail me.
To blackmail? Now, why should he want to do that?
You know perfectly well, Mr. Foxley. Your clients have been primed to the brim with his allegations.
Well, if they have, they want the jury to share their knowledge. What were his allegations?
That I was not myself.
Now, who did he think you were?
He pretended to think I was Wellney.
Wellney? Now, would you please describe poor Wellney's appearance to the jury?
Oh, nothing peculiar. Very ordinary-looking fellow.
Oh, now, come. I don't want you to be unduly modest. Was he not, in fact, remarkably like you?
No.
Well, then I'll put my question to you in another way. Wasn't he remarkably like Sir Mark Lutton?
I never noticed it.
You never noticed it?
Never.
Did other people notice
No.
it? Quite sure?
Yes.
I wonder if you remember whether Sir Mark Lutton ever wrote home.
You mean, did I?
Well, if you like to put it that way.
Not often. There were great difficulties in getting letters through.
Now, I wonder if you know whether Sir Mark ever wrote to his cousin Gerald.
Did I? Certainly not. At least, not that I remember.
Would you look at that letter? The usher will pass it to you. Go.
Thank you.
Now, is it dated 10th of May, 1916?
Yes.
It seems to be addressed to your dear cousin Gerald.
Yes.
And to be signed Mark Lutton. Do you happen to remember Sir Mark's signature?
I'd forgotten. I must have written.
Oh, no. I'm not suggesting that you did. But it looks as though Mark Lutton did.
You needn't be so offensive. Of course it is my letter.
Is it?
Yes.
Well, will you please read the last paragraph to the jury?
Certainly. There are only 2 other British prisoners here, both Canadians. The prison staff affect to see a remarkable resemblance between me and one of them called Wellney. I can't see it myself. I told you I didn't.
Read on to the jury, please.
Wellney himself is quite laughably interested in the similarity. Almost feels one of the Lutton family already.
Almost feels one of the Lutton family already. Yes. Well, that must have struck you as highly amusing.
Let me look at that letter.
Now, doesn't that letter recall anything to you?
No, it's a long time ago.
Oh, that is a pity. Now, I wonder if you remember any physical peculiarities about this man, Wellney.
No, I can't say I do.
No. Well, then I shall have to try and help you.
Thank you very much.
I'm lucky enough to have an official description of Wellney from the Canadian Army records.
Most fortunate.
Now, let's see if it helps us at all. Height, 5'10". That's about your height, isn't it?
And a good many millions besides.
I dare say. But if Wellney had happened to be only 5'6", he couldn't have been you. Blue eyes. What color are yours?
Can't you see for yourself?
And so can the jury, if you will be good enough to look at them. Thank you. Blue. Thick crop of gray, almost white hair. Now, how would you describe yours?
How would you describe yours if you'd been through what I went through?
To what date does this official description of Wellney relate, Mr. Foxley?
The year 1915, my lord.
Suppose a man's hair had not been grey then, it might well be very grey after all these years, Mr. Foxley.
I am aware of that, my lord, but...
If indeed it had not largely disappeared, as it has with so many of us.
The point is, my lord, that Wellney's was prematurely grey so long ago as 1915.
It may be my fault, Mr. Foxley, but I don't see how that is going to help us.
It is a link in the chain, my lord.
Don't they say the strength of a chain is that of its weakest link?
Yes, my lord. I hope my chain will bear whatever weight I put on it.
Yes, well, we must wait and see. Yes, Mr. Foxley?
Now, this Wellney was also apparently a man who'd lost the first 2 joints of the first finger of his right hand.
Had he?
Oh, do you mean to suggest to this court that you don't remember that quite well? Come,
yes,
come.
Yes, I do remember now. Oh, yes. He had lost a finger. Most of us at that camp had been wounded. We didn't take too much notice of each other's wounds.
Now, I see by my records that a court-martial found that Wellness was a self-inflicted wound. You know what that means?
Perfectly.
For which Wellney was reduced to the ranks.
Very properly, I should say.
Oh, I'm glad we have some sentiments in common. How did you lose yours?
My finger, do you mean?
Yes. By a curious coincidence, you've lost the first finger on your right hand.
I don't know about coincidence, but I'm not ashamed of my wound.
How did you lose yours?
My finger was shot off by a chance German bullet when I was escaping.
When you were escaping? Yeah. Now, that would produce the interesting result that no one who was at the prison camp with you could remember that Sir Mark Lutton had lost a finger.
Of course not. But I do, Mr. Fox.
Would you mind holding your right hand up to the jury so that they may remember too? Thank you. Now, I wonder if you remember my solicitors asking if you would submit to a medical examination.
Perfectly.
Why did you refuse?
Because I regarded it as an infamous suggestion that any gutter rag should imagine that a gross libel gave them the right to demand a physical inspection of anybody's body.
And that was done under my advice, Mr. Fox.
I'm sure it was most excellent advice, Sir Wilfrid. Well, now I'm going to read to the jury something else from this official record of the unfortunate Frank Welney. Has the initials F.W. tattooed on his right forearm?
Have he? Yes. Now I come to think of it, yes, I remember he was tattooed.
I wonder if you would mind showing my lord and the jury your forearm.
What is your suggestion?
Oh, I'm glad to make it clear. I definitely suggest your right forearm has the letters F.W. tattooed on it.
I don't want to conceal anything. I'm quite prepared to admit my arm is tattooed. And has some letters on it. But not those.
May we see for ourselves what they are?
Really, my lord, is it necessary for me to submit to every insult from counsel?
Mr. Foxley is only doing what he is entitled to regard as his duty for his clients.
Do what Mr. Foxley asks, Sir Mark.
Very well. There you are. I'll pull my sleeve back.
The letters on F.W. No, we don't. Yes, thank you. Would you show your arm to my lord and the jury?
As far as I can see, the initials tattooed on the plaintiff's arm are not F.W., but E.W.
That is so, my lord. Oh, please leave your arm exposed. I wonder if you would satisfy our curiosity by telling us what those initials E.W. stand for.
They have rather an intimate explanation, Mr. Foxley.
Oh, no, I won't press you to reveal any intimacy. But I warn you, I shall comment freely on your inability to explain them.
I can't help that, if you've no feeling of decency.
I shall suggest that those letters, E.W., were originally F.W. for Frank Welney. It would only require the addition of a single stroke to turn the F into an E, would it not?
A single stroke. Yes. Yes, I suppose that's so.
Very well. Now I'll give you another chance of explaining those letters.
Very well, if you must have it. E is my wife's initial. Her name is Enid.
Indeed.
Yes.
But if the letter was originally F, that explanation would not do.
No, but as it never was, that is no difficulty.
And what is the W for?
The W stands for her maiden name, which was Winterton.
And when did you have them tattooed?
In Hobheim camp, by a fellow prisoner.
Why?
To pass the time. Time goes rather slowly in a prison camp.
I dare say. It comes to this, doesn't it? Frank Welney, the Canadian coward, had F.W. tattooed on his right forearm before his captivity, and Sir Mark Lutton, the English baronet, had E.W., almost the same letters, tattooed on the same arm during his captivity. Of course, it's only a coincidence, but isn't it wonderful?
Is it?
Now, I believe Sir Mark Lutton was shot through both thighs at the Battle of the Marne.
I was.
A medical examination would have confirmed.
Everyone knows I've walked lame ever since.
But everyone doesn't know the reason.
I've never hesitated to tell them.
I dare say not. It might have been instructive to see those scars.
My lord, I'm calling a most eminent doctor on that point.
Then it's a pity, Sir Wilfrid, you didn't allow our doctor to collaborate in the inspection. It comes to this, doesn't it? The only physical peculiarities associated with Lutton up to his captivity were bullet wounds in both thighs. And the only physical peculiarities associated with Welney up to his captivity were prematurely grey hair, a lost finger, and tattooed initials on his arm.
I take your word for it.
And today, by a remarkable coincidence, your body manages to combine all the physical peculiarities of Lutton and Welney.
I see what you mean.
Now, if Welney were pretending to be Sir Mark Lutton, that would have to be the case. But if Sir Mark Lutton was not Welney, it wouldn't be necessary for his body to display all the peculiarities of Welney's body.
Oh, I call that utter nonsense. If I was ever foolish enough to get tattooed, I should be bound to remain tattooed.
Yes, but unless you were Welney, you wouldn't be bound to get tattooed at all.
I think the jury have got that point, Mr. Foxley.
If your lordship pleases. And why all this mystery about your alleged thigh wounds? I put it to you that a man who would shoot off his own finger wouldn't hesitate to inflict some superficial injury to his thighs if it was worthwhile.
You'd better ask your friend Welney that.
Am I not doing so?
No, you are not.
Now, only a few more questions. Where were you educated?
Eton and Sandhurst.
I see Welney was educated at an elementary school in Montreal.
Again, I take your word for it.
He would never have had the opportunity or the chance of learning Latin or Greek.
Perhaps he didn't miss much.
Will you tell me the names of some of the Latin authors you studied?
I don't remember any. I was shell-shocked.
Oh, I won't ask you to translate, but can you tell me the name of a single Latin author?
I tell you, I was shell-shocked. I remember nothing pre-war.
Well, would it help you if I suggested a name or two? Do you remember Homer? Demosthenes?
They might be Dutch, for all I remember.
Oh, that's rather unkind of me, learned Fraser's little tramp.
Sir Mark Lutton went into the Rifle Brigade.
Yes.
And served with them for something like 7 years before the war.
Yes, and I remember nothing of it at all. I'm not ashamed. For the reason for it, I don't want to be shell-shocked out of all the memories of youth. Here am I, a man of 40, over 40, and for practical purposes, my recollections of life started about 10 years ago.
Silence! Silence!
And tell me this, then. If this alleged loss of memory was so complete, how was it you were able to remember your pre-war engagement and the lady's name at Hobheim prison camp? Huh?
If you insist on an answer, I will give it, Mr. Foxley. Though I'd rather not.
I can well believe that. Tell the jury, please.
Well, I might have forgotten. I might have continued to forget my engagement and even my fiancée's name. But some of her letters were in my pocket when I was taken prisoner, and later letters from her naturally revived my recollection. I should say I very largely relearnt the details of my family and hers from my fiancée's letters.
Well, now, can you produce any letters written by Sir Mark Lutton from Hobheim to his home in which he makes any reference to being either shell-shocked or deprived of memory or tattooed?
I haven't got any of my own letters here.
No, but if you were allowed time to secure them, could you produce any reference to any of these things?
I can't say after all these years.
Oh, think, sir.
Oh, very likely not. You see, I didn't want my fiancée to know how bad my shell shock was. She might have...
Well, she might what?
She might have hesitated about marrying a man like that.
Why?
She might have been afraid of his brain.
Ah. Now, one last question.
Yes?
I have here some specimens of Sir Mark's pre-war and prison handwriting and your post-war handwriting.
Well?
Well, they're rather different, aren't they?
Shoot off your first finger and see if your handwriting is the same.
Did you shoot off yours?
No, I did not.
But Welney did.
If I'm Welney, what became of Lutton?
A most interesting question, which I don't propose to answer now.
I don't really know. There's much I need try to clear up by re-examination, Sir Mark. In spite of my learned friend's curiosity, are you still quite certain that you are yourself?
Yes, Sir Wilfrid, I'm more certain than I ever was.
Who first suggested you were not?
That Canadian, Buckingham.
Tell the jury how he intervened.
Yes, certainly. 2 years ago, he came to Ingworth Hall and asked to see me.
Under what name did he ask for you?
My own name, of course, Mark Lutton.
Well?
He was, or said he was, penniless, and he asked for money. I gave him a tenner for old time's sake. That is where I made the mistake.
Why?
He didn't think it enough. He became very abusive. I had to send for the keepers to have him turned out of the park.
Perhaps one day we may encounter Captain Buckingham.
Perhaps.
One last question.
Yes?
About those tattoo marks. What inspired you to get tattooed at Hobheim?
I believe it was really the sight of the letters on Wilney's arm which put the idea into my head. Then, as time hung so heavily on our hands and I heard it was a long job, I thought I'd be tattooed.
What was the underlying idea of selecting the initials of your wife's maiden name? Tell the jury.
Well, one summer the prisoners died like flies from cholera. It occurred to me that I might easily die at that camp, and I thought I'd like my fiancée, if I did die, to know, well, that I carried her initials to my grave.
Yes.
Sounds romantic, but, well, of course, some of us are.
Yes, of course. Well, I have no doubt the jury will be able to understand that sentiment, Sir Mark. Thank you. You may leave the box.
Thank you, Sir Wilfrid.
Very well.
Lady Lutton, Lady Lutton.
Take the book in your right hand. You swear by Almighty God.
One moment. I don't want to appear to interfere with the conduct of the case by counsel of your experience, Sir Wilfrid, but...
Lord, I should welcome any suggestion.
Of course, I am not in any way prejudging the issues, but in view of the plaintiff's own evidence and other evidence, which I must assume to be at your disposal, is it really necessary to impose on Lady Lutton the strain of giving evidence?
But I ought to give evidence for my husband. I promise...
One moment, Lady Lutton. Your Lordship will appreciate that my friend Mr. Foxley might feel justified in allowing himself certain comment if he were denied the opportunity of cross-examining Lady Lutton.
What do you say, Mr. Foxley?
Oh, I entirely agree with your Lordship. This lady's evidence under the peculiar circumstances could carry my friend's case no further. And I hope I needn't assure the court that the very responsible paper which I represent has no desire to add in any way to the poignancy of Lady Lutton's position.
I am much obliged, my friend.
I was confident that would be so, Mr. Foxley. Then, Lady Lutton, you'll be relieved, I feel sure, to be free from the necessity of giving any evidence.
My lord, of course I must do what you think best.
Yes, you can leave the box now, Lady Lutton. If you find the strain too great, you can, of course, leave the court.
Thank you, my lord. I couldn't leave the court.
I don't think we can go any further today, Sir Wilfrid. Are you calling any more witnesses?
I may, of course, have to ask your Lordship's indulgence to call rebutting evidence at a later stage. Subject to that, I only propose to call the witnesses I've indicated and Sir Eric Fulsham, the well-known surgeon.
Then, Mr. Foxley, we ought to be able to begin the case for the defense tomorrow afternoon.
Undoubtedly, my lord. And I shall try to emulate my learned friend's uncharacteristic brevity in opening.
That will leave me equally indebted to you both.
The following afternoon, about 3 p.m., the court is again in full session. Mr. Thomas Foxley, K.C., has risen and is now delivering his opening speech for the defendant's newspaper.
Now, with regard to the general case which will be laid before you by me and my learned friend on behalf of the great newspaper which we represent. Members of the jury, I have purposely refrained from telling you even the nature of the evidence by which we shall sustain our case. I want you to hear the details from the witnesses themselves and leave you to form your own impressions. I venture to think you will be surprised. Now, as I said to you at the start, if we are right, we shall have discharged a public duty. We shall have exposed a cold, calculated fraud on the tenderest affections, on a devoted tenantry, on a patriotic electorate. If we are wrong, we shall have to pay for it. You will make us pay a lot for it. We ought to pay a lot for it, but are we wrong? Now let me review quite shortly the evidence put before you by the plaintiff to convince you that he is an English baronet, an English officer, an English MP. First, there was the plaintiff's own evidence. I'll say nothing about that. I leave you to form your own opinion about his shell-shocked memory. I will only make this observation. Wouldn't it have been appallingly inconvenient for the plaintiff in a case like this if a chance shell had not enabled him to refuse an answer to every question on the whole of his life up to 10 years ago? Now, members of the jury, to pass from the plaintiff, whom else did my learned friend call? We had his parents-in-law. How far did their evidence take us? You will recall, members of the jury, what they said. We have never had a moment's doubt of his identity, and we have not now. You may well come to the conclusion, members of the jury, that these parents-in-law would be stultifying their own discharge of their own duties in the custody of their daughter if they admitted any doubt of the plaintiff's identity.
Oh, come, Mr. Foxley, is that really fair?
Really, my lord, I must protest against my learned friend's gratuitous interruption.
I deprecate interruption of counsel's speeches unless they involve correction of facts proved in evidence.
I do hope my learned friend will allow me just a few undisturbed minutes to conclude my speech. Lastly, members of the jury, as I was about to say, we had Sir Eric Fulsham, the famous specialist. Now, he gave evidence on 2 points, shell shock and thigh wounds. Did you really derive much assistance from him? Now, do correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't his evidence boil down to this? A shell shock may produce a vast variety of effects, nearly all of them subjective. That is to say, for practical purposes, not visible to simple souls like you and me. Now, did we need to drag here the busiest and most fashionable surgeon in Harley Street to learn that? Then Sir Eric went on to say that he found on both of the plaintiff's thigh marks indicating some form of penetration, that it was impossible after this lapse of time to speak with certainty. They were not inconsistent with bullet wounds. And, oh, really, members of the jury, what is the value of that? It still leaves us reduced to this dilemma. Either the plaintiff is Sir Mark Lutton, who we know was shot through both thighs, or, being Frank Welney, he has deliberately produced injuries corresponding to Sir Mark's.
I really would be grateful if my friend would indicate how the cooperation of his doctor would have assisted the solution of that dilemma.
I really would be grateful if my learned friend would refrain from these constant interruptions.
Yes, Mr. Foxley.
If your lordship pleases. Well, members of the jury, I shall now conclude. Our publication was intended, as is obvious, to be a challenge which no one in public life could possibly evade. It has been accepted. It had to be accepted. Members of the jury, I am confident your verdict will vindicate the public spirit of my clients. That is really all I shall say at present, and I shall now, with the assistance of my learned junior, Mr. Hemsby, call the evidence for the defense. Mr. Hemsby, call Patrick Buckingham.
Patrick Buckingham.
Take the book in your right hand. You swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
The evidence you shall give.
The evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Your name is Patrick Buckingham, and during the war, you were a captain in the 7th Ontario Pioneers.
That's right.
You were taken prisoner at Ypres the end of April 1915.
I was.
And were sent to Hobheim Camp.
Yes.
How many British officers were there?
After the cholera outbreak in 1915, only 3 of us were left. Him, Mark Lutton, and me.
Who is him?
Welney, of course.
Now, how do you know the plaintiff is Welney?
Same as I know anyone else by his face.
Of course.
I was in prison with him for about 3 years. We were both Canadians, so we palled up. Mark Lutton was a good guy, but very English. Not stuck up, you understand, but not really pally. Keep myself to myself sort of sportsman.
Yes, now, was there any resemblance between Welney and Lutton?
Well, up to a point, they might have been twins. But he was always gray as a badger, and Lutton hadn't the gray hair.
What, not even after his experience in that fire on the Mark?
Not him. I never heard of him being in a fire.
No, of course not. Now, we have seen for ourselves how terribly shell-shocked the plaintiff is. Whilst you were at Hopheim with Sir Mark Lutton, did you notice his shell shock?
No, I didn't. He was as lame as an old crow with thigh wounds. That was his only trouble.
Are you sure of that?
Well, how do you think we heard all about his family history and estates if his memory was all shell-shocked away?
I thought he was so reserved.
Yeah.
Really? Please.
So he was reserved up to a point, but about a year after we'd been there together, word came that his father had died and that he was a baronet. So he had to start and explain things a bit. Welney took a lot more interest in him then. Seemed kind of fascinated by the title.
And you say that Lutton was able to explain things?
Sure, as well as you could.
Yeah. Now, we've heard that Frank Welney had lost a finger.
He had, but I never knew till yesterday he'd shot it off himself.
And that F.W. was tattooed on his right forearm.
That's right, sir. And the letters were the same size and pattern as the E.W. on his arm I saw in court yesterday.
Ah, now that's very interesting. Now, do you remember Sir Mark Lutton's tattoo?
Lutton never had anything tattooed. Too much of the English gentleman.
I can believe it. Do you remember Sir Mark losing his finger when he escaped?
Of course I don't. Nothing wrong with his arms or hand then.
Thank you. Now, let's get on quickly to October 1918. What happened then?
Well, our guards were reduced, so we tried to escape.
Now, who are we?
Lutton, Welney, and I.
Yeah.
We got off all right at the first attempt, and we trekked towards the Belgian frontier, moving at night. That meant getting over about 250 miles.
250 miles to the frontier, yes, well.
About a month later, a few days before the armistice, we reached the outskirts of a small town, Stavelot, just over the frontier by Malmedy.
What happened then?
Well, it was my turn to forage for food. Welney or I always had to do it. You see, we got hold of civvies. Lutton was in uniform all the time, so he had to lie low.
Yes, well, you went off to forage near Stavelot.
Yeah, I went off, and I left the other two in a wood about half a mile up the hill outside the town. When I got back with some grub, Welney had done a bunk.
Done a bunk?
Well, he disappeared. Only Lutton was there, and he,
Yes? What had happened?
Well, I reckon we'll never know the exact truth.
Tell the jury what you saw.
I saw Mark Lutton where I'd left them both. He was lying on the ground with his head bashed in.
Any signs of a struggle?
There sure was. Lutton's clothes were more red than khaki. His arm had been smashed to a pulp.
Which arm?
His right arm. He was smothered in blood, face and arms.
And you say that there was no trace of Welney?
No. And no trace of anything in Lutton's pockets either.
Well, what did you do?
Well, I lifted him as well as I could in the dark, and I took him along to the door of the first big house. Left him on the step, and I ran away like hell.
And what did you do then?
I shoved along in the right direction, keeping an eye open for our friend over there.
Oh, whom do you mean?
Welney.
Welney.
I didn't want him to do me in, too.
When did you meet Welney? When did you meet the plaintiff again?
I was wandering around the country about 2 years ago on Shank's pony. I came to some village in Norfolk with a fine old park and model cottages. The sort of place that makes you feel that if you were the squire, you wouldn't change places with a millionaire.
Yes? Huh?
I had a drink in the pub, and I asked whose place it was. They told me it was Sir Mark Lutton's. Well, I pricked up my ears. I knew poor old Mark was dead, but I went along. I thought it might be some sort of relation who'd come across with a bit after I'd told him about the last hours of Sir Mark.
Well?
I went along and I asked to see the squire. They told me he was out. Just then, who should come up but my old pal Welney. Quite the squire, too. Good gun over his shoulder. Damn nice dog at his heels. You could have knocked me over with a feather. And the same feather would have knocked him over, too. Well, I recovered first, though I hadn't seen him since the night he left poor old Lutton murdered. I asked him what the devil he was doing there, and he said, "Who the hell is this?"
To whom did he say that?
To his butler, Judge. He was standing beside us. I said, "None of your jokes, Frank. You know Pat Buckingham just as well as he knows you."
Yes, what then?
Well, he seemed to pull himself together a bit, and he asked me to have a drink. We went into a really fine room, and when he'd shut the door behind us, I said, "What are you doing here, Frank?" And I remember he said, "Why do you keep calling me Frank? My name's Mark." "None of your nonsense," I said. "It was dirty work of yours, Frank, to wind up poor old Mark like that." Then he got angry, and the feathers began to fly, and well, I came out a damn sight quicker than I went in.
You must remember that you're in an English court, Captain Buckingham. What do you mean?
Well, he had me chucked out, and that made me sore.
Well?
I soon figured out that he was pretending to be Sir Mark Lutton. So I made it my business to find out the man who ought to be in Sir Mark's shoes and have his house and title and estate.
And who was that?
Captain Gerald Lutton.
Yeah.
He lived in the next village. I had what you might call a heart-to-heart talk with him. There you are.
I suppose you mean he was interested in what you told him.
I've never seen a man more interested in anything.
Yes, I dare say that might be the case.
Now, I'll ask you only one more question. Have you, now that you've been watching him for 2 days, the least doubt of the identity of the plaintiff?
No. He's Frank Welney.
Thank you.
Captain Buckingham. Captain Buckingham. Am I right in assuming that your suggestion is that Frank Welney murdered Sir Mark Lutton?
Of course he did. I left them together.
What sort of time was it?
About 8, 9 o'clock.
A few days before the armistice. It would be dark.
It was dark. I told you so.
Then how can you be so sure that it was poor old Mark and not Welney that you carried? His face, you said, was smothered in blood.
No doubt about it. If I hadn't known his shape when I carried him, I'd have known his uniform. I tell you, he was the only one of the party in uniform.
I dare say. How long ago was your call at Ingworth?
Just over a year ago.
What employment have you had since?
Oh, I've seen different people about the case.
Mm-hmm. What have you lived on?
Different people have given me money.
Now, aren't you lucky? I wonder who?
The Gazette have given me a bit.
That sounds most generous of them. How much?
£5 a week to keep me in England.
And who else has given you money?
Captain Gerald Lutton sends me a tenner a month.
Seems to be a generous, open-handed sportsman. But what made the Gazette so lavish?
How should I know?
It's some years now since you were demobilized.
It is.
And where have you lived during those years, Captain Buckingham?
Different places.
I wonder if I can guess some of them. Did you spend 9 months at Liverpool? In jail?
Beg pardon, Judge. Is the barrister allowed to go into my private troubles?
Certainly is, in cross-examination. Answer learned counsel's questions. They are directed to the point whether you are a person to be believed on your oath.
Did I guess the right address for those 9 months in 1920?
Yes.
That was for false pretenses?
Yes.
And then did you spend 18 months at Newcastle?
Yes.
In prison? What was that for?
Same sort of thing.
Wasn't it for blackmail?
Something of the sort.
Some people might describe you as a professional blackmailer.
Then some people would be wrong.
And you're at it again, aren't you?
What do you mean?
Look at that letter. The usher will bring it to you. That's your letter, isn't it?
Yes.
Written a year ago to the plaintiff?
Yes.
Hand it back. Nice, gentlemanly letter, wasn't it?
It's the letter of a stupid fool on his uppers.
A pretty effort in blackmail. What would you have done if you'd had the shock of getting the £1,000 you demanded in the letter?
I'd have cleared off and said nothing.
I suggest you'd have bled Sir Mark Lutton white as veal again and again.
No, I'd have left him alone.
Although you say he had murdered your friend and secured his wife by the foulest treachery?
She was no concern of mine.
No, the blackmail was your concern. I think the jury will know what to think of you and your evidence. You may leave the box.
Call Flodo. Dr. Emile Flodo.
Me voici, Monsieur Buckley, je viens. Permettez-moi de passer. Merci.
Mon assistant a un gros
You speak English, I take it.
Certainly, yes.
Take the book in your right hand. You swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
The evidence you shall give.
The evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Your name is Émile Florent, and you practice as a doctor of medicine in the town of Stavelot on the old Belgian frontier.
Oui, I mean yes.
I believe you understand English, Doctor.
Perfectly, monsieur, perfectly.
I think you act as physician and surgeon to the Hospice d'Aliénés at Stavelot.
For more than 20 years, that is so.
That is a public lunatic asylum.
For the poor and friendless at the expense of the state.
Do you remember something which happened 2 days before the armistice in 1918?
Yes, it come back to me distinctly. A boy summoned me at midnight to a farmhouse just outside Malmedy. It was raining, I remember, in water spouts. But I sallied forth in spite of it. Who knew what mischief I might not be able to avert?
Who indeed, Doctor? Well?
On arrival at the farm, there on the doorstep lay a corpse in very old English uniform. You call it khaki. I knelt down, I felt a pulse, the heart. The corpse was not quite dead, but also nearly a corpse has made no difference.
In what condition was the body?
This skull has been fractured with truly cruel lacerations by some heavy blunt instrument. The face is drenched in blood. Slowly the blood still oozes from the right hand and arm. Evidently there has been a terrible struggle. The wounded man has been attacked with the butt of a rifle or some heavy club. He has tried to protect his poor head with his right arm, and in the struggle he has received heavy blows, ever so many in succession, on his arm. His poor arm and elbow is smashed, and then his brutal assailant completed his murder with some heavy weapon. Almost certainly, as I say, the butt of a rifle or...
I'm sorry to interrupt, monsieur, but I want to be quite clear. You are giving us your conjectures of the struggle. You didn't happen to watch it?
No, Dieu merci. But sometimes science can be more definite than sight. The injuries told the tale ever so clearly to the trained mind.
I think the humbler intelligences in this court were able to understand you, Doctor.
Yes, please continue, Doctor. What did you do?
There was no hope of recovery, but I determined to do my best. I dressed his wounds at the farm, and next morning had him removed to my hospice for mental cases, where I amputated his right arm.
And then?
Gradually, a miracle occurred. Sometimes it so happened. My poor unfortunate recovered completely, in a physical sense. But the appalling concussion of the blows which so nearly killed him has deprived him of all intelligence.
Can he speak?
I cannot say. He has a tongue. He has not ever used it. He cannot understand a word written or spoken English or French. He cannot think.
What became of your patient? He is alive, I gather.
Oh, yes, my lord. He has ever since been an inmate. We call him Numéro 15.
Number 15. Why?
Well, what other name could we give him? We knew him not. And that has ever since been the number of his cell.
I believe you produced 1 or 2 exhibits associated with this sad case.
Oh, yes, in this parcel of mine. Thank you, William. Thank you very much. Now, this is the khaki jacket Numéro 15 was wearing at the time. See how it is stained with torrents of blood. It has lost the right sleeve. It is unfortunate I had to cut that off to examine the arm. It could not be helped.
Unless my learned friend will admit it, I shall prove later, my lord, that the badges and buttons of this jacket were worn by officers of the Rifle Brigade.
I'll admit, my lord, that exhibit is the Rifle Brigade jacket, but I shall ask your lordship at a later stage to let me call the plaintiff on this point, which was never put to him, I'm afraid.
Oh, my learned friend's quite right. I cannot object.
Very well, Sir Wilfrid, I'll remember.
Do you produce anything else, Doctor?
Yes. I have brought with me another exhibit from Belgium.
Numéro 15.
Number 15.
Yes, my lord. That so unfortunate body without a brain. May my assistant bring him in?
I am sure my lord will allow it. Who is this man, Doctor?
That is numéro 15. May I come down from this box and display certain features?
I am sure my lord will permit it.
Now, as you see, that right arm was amputated to save his life.
There are traces of thigh injuries, I believe.
A bullet or bullets have traversed both thighs. Here.
I dare say your lordship will allow the jury to see those wounds at the rising of the court in a private room.
In the presence of both parties, yes.
If your lordship please.
Now, Dr. Claudon, if you please, resume your place in the box.
Back in the case. Oh, yes. Thank you.
Now, there is an important question in this case, Doctor.
Ah, oui, monsieur.
It is whether this poor man's real name is Welney, or whether his real name is Sir Mark Lutton.
That is indeed an interesting question, and pour numéro 15, he does not know, he cannot tell.
But can you tell us, Doctor, whether the amputated arm had lost a finger, or was tattooed with the letters F.W.?
Ah, no, I should have seen them. I must have seen them. And the lost finger, that too I should have seen.
Yes. Thank you, Doctor. Sir Wilfrid.
Thank you. I want you, monsieur, to help us all as far as you can in dealing with this mysterious case.
I shall be only too happy, Sir Wilfrid.
Now, just a word about that amputated right arm. Would you swear that that night so many years ago you looked for injured fingers or tattoo marks?
No, I dare not.
Would you all these years after destroy a happy marriage and make an innocent child a bastard by swearing that there was no special scars or peculiarities on that arm?
Mais, monsieur, Milord, I have a conscience. I dare not.
I knew I could allow no scruples. Now, about the leg wounds. It has been suggested that he walked about 250 miles in a month. Could he?
Oh, no, he could not do so. Of that I am confident. It is absurd.
But if he is Frank Welney, he must have done so.
Then he is not Welney.
And if he is Lutton, he must have done so.
Then he is not Lutton. I tell you, unless he were a Superman, he could not walk 250 miles in a month on those poor legs.
It comes to this, Doctor, doesn't it? No one can claim to have the least idea who he is.
That is wiser when all is so vague.
All I suggest is he can't be Sir Mark Lutton because Sir Mark is alive and well there.
How could you be mistaken, Sir Wilfrid? Evidently, that must be so.
Merci, monsieur.
Enchanté, Sir Wilfrid.
Thank you.
Well, can we get on, Mr. Hemsby?
Excuse me, your lordship, but will you wait 1 minute for Mr. Foxley? He's having an important consultation with our clients, only just outside the court.
Why should I wait for Mr. Foxley? What is a junior for, Mr. Hemsby?
In a case of this importance, my lad, to be seen and not heard.
Do you wish to re-examine this witness, Mr. Hemsby?
No, my lad.
Then you can go, Dr. Claudon. Leave the box, monsieur.
Ah, c'est fini.
Oui, yes, thank you, Dr. Claudon.
Merci, monsieur le juge. Je vous remercie beaucoup de votre grande patience, parce que...
Will you call your next witness, Mr. Hemsby?
I'm in some difficulty, my lad. I don't really know whom my learned leader was proposing to call next.
In his absence, you are in charge of the defense. If you have any further witness to call, that witness must go into the box now, or your case is closed.
Here is Mr. Foxley now, my lad.
I must apologize. I needn't assure you that my absence meant no disrespect to your lordship's court.
Are you going to call any further evidence, Mr. Foxley?
Yes, my lord. I have my next witness ready.
Well, will you call him?
I call Lady Lutton.
Whom, Mr. Foxley?
Lady Lutton, my lord.
Sir Mark's wife?
The plaintiff's wife. Your lordship will recall that
There was some question of her giving evidence yesterday.
Yes, of course, yes. This is very unusual.
It is a very unusual case, my lord.
So it seems. Very well.
Call Lady Lutton.
Lady Lutton. You swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
The evidence you shall give.
The evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Lady Lutton, you have not been served with any subpoena to give evidence.
No.
You are giving evidence of your own free will.
Well, Lady Lutton?
No. Not exactly of my own free will, Mr. Foxley.
Not of her own
Sir
free
Wilfrid,
will,
please.
I should think you should explain that, Lady Lutton.
I'm here because, well, my father insists I ought to give my evidence, and I...
But your father, General Winterton, has already given evidence for Sir Mark.
For the plaintiff, my lord. I am now calling his daughter, this lady, for the defendant.
Of course, that is obvious. Well, Lady Lutton, are you willing to be called on behalf of the defense?
It's for Mark.
Sir Mark?
I must, even now.
You seem to be taking a great risk, Mr. Foxley.
I am prepared to incur it, my lord. Your name is Enid, and you are the only daughter of General Winterton, C.B.
Yes.
Before we go any further, Lady Lutton, I think perhaps you owe an explanation to my lord and to the jury.
Why? Why, Mr. Foxley?
They saw you yesterday go into the box, apparently prepared to give evidence for your husband.
Yes.
If you had given evidence yesterday, would it have been the evidence you are prepared to give today?
No. The evidence I promised to give wouldn't have been the same.
Lady Lutton, I am sure you don't mean you had promised to give evidence to mislead this court?
Oh, no, my lord, of course not. When I told my husband's solicitors what I'd say, I thought... I felt sure it was the truth then.
Then? I see. Well, Mr. Foxley?
If your lordship please. Now, Lady Lutton, did you in 1914 become engaged to Mark, only son and heir of Sir Peter Lutton, Baronet of Ingworth Hall in the county of Norfolk?
Yes.
I believe you were very young at that time.
I was only 17.
Did you in April 1919 go through the ceremony of marriage with the plaintiff at Ingworth Church?
Yes.
Was your husband married to you as Sir Mark Lutton?
Yes.
Now, only 3 more questions from me, Lady Lutton. Did Mark Lutton ever write to you from captivity?
At regular intervals, after the first 2 months.
Now, I want you to search your memory most carefully, as indeed I know you will. Did any of those letters reveal to you any loss of pre-war memories?
No. No. Before he could have heard from me after he was taken prisoner, he wrote and asked me to wait for him until the war was over.
And you did?
Yes, I waited.
Did he ever complain in those letters of shell shock?
He never complained of anything.
Never complained of it. Now, one final question, Lady Lutton. Do you now believe your husband, the plaintiff in this action, is really Mark Lutton?
Well, Lady Lutton?
No. No. He's not Mark Lutton.
Enid. Sir Mark. My client is unwell, my lord.
The plaintiff appears to have fainted. My lord, may I suggest...
I think perhaps in the circumstances we will adjourn and resume tomorrow at 10:30.
The next morning, about 10:30 a.m., the court is again ready for trial and awaiting the arrival of Mr. Justice Tuttington. The judge's clerk has just come in. He's standing at the back of the bench. In a moment, he'll call for silence and the judge will enter.
Silence! Silence!
Mr. Foxley. Mr. Foxley, I see that when I adjourned the court yesterday in view of the plaintiff's sudden indisposition, you had not closed your examination in chief.
That is so, my lord. And I shall not distress Lady Lutton by any more questions, my
I
lord.
see. Lady Lutton, will you come into the box for Sir Wilfrid's cross-examination?
I'd rather she came into the box, really. I hope it'll be all right. Thank you.
Lady Lutton, your husband is most anxious that I should not cross-examine his wife. You will forgive me if I overrule his wishes.
Certainly, Sir Wilfrid. You must do your duty.
Well, let us begin by clearing up one or two points, Lady Lutton.
Yes, Sir Wilfrid.
Take those tattoo marks on your husband's arm. When did you first see them?
On his return from Germany.
What letters were they then?
Just like they are now. E.W.
E.W. So at least my learned friend was wrong in trying to suggest an F became an E for the purposes of this trial.
I've never seen anything but E.W. on his arm.
Now, a word on the subject of the plaintiff's memory.
Yes?
I think you told my friend yesterday that your husband's letters from Germany revealed no loss of memory.
Not my husband's letters, Sir Wilfrid. They were marks.
Yes, I'm not for the moment on the subject of identification, Lady Lutton.
Oh, I see.
The jury will remember your husband has given his explanation of these letters.
Yes.
But coming to a later period, it is true, isn't it, that since his return, his memory of pre-war events has been practically a blank.
My husband's memory? Oh, yes. He's hardly known anything.
So there again, whatever the explanation, his loss of memory has not been assumed in order to defeat Mr. Foxley.
Oh, no. That at least is real enough.
I felt sure you would admit that. Now, Lady Lutton, I'm afraid I must ask you a rather intimate question.
Yes.
Lady Lutton, did you love your husband when you married him?
Not as I loved Mark Lutton. But I felt I ought to.
Did you never grow to love him?
Yes. But not as I loved Mark.
When did you first suspect that, in your opinion, he wasn't so much?
It's so terribly difficult to explain. I never exactly suspected. Till yesterday.
I see.
And yet, even from the first, I felt there was something different. Yes. Even when he first came back, something quite different.
Something different?
There always seemed to be a sort of wall between us. A wall I could never pass through. There were things I could never ask him. Things he would never talk about.
But wasn't that natural, Lady Lutton, after all those years of separation and after all your husband had gone through? He might well wish to forget so much, mightn't he?
I tried so hard to think so, but now I understand.
Now you understand.
Since yesterday.
You mean your suspicions became more definite yesterday?
Yes, after hearing the evidence, after seeing...
Don't distress yourself, Lady Lutton. Then apart from yesterday's evidence, you would not be so certain.
I don't know.
Yet if your husband were in fact Frank Wellner, numero 15 should be Mark Lutton. Is that what you mean?
I don't know. I don't know. And I don't know my husband must be Wellner. I only know he isn't Mark.
You mean you don't believe he is Mark?
I don't believe he's Mark. Well, isn't that the same thing?
Not quite, Lady Lutton. Would you swear to recognize numero 15?
No. That's just it. I couldn't. Well, that's the terrible part. It's too awful. I can't recognize him at all. I can't. But I saw my husband's face when poor numero 15 came into court. I saw then by his look. He recognized him even if I can't.
Lady Lutton, since giving your evidence yesterday, have you asked your husband for an explanation of that look?
No, I haven't spoken to him. I spent the night at my father's house.
And your husband?
I suppose he was alone.
Alone? And at this crisis of his fate?
Oh, don't drive me, Sir Wilfrid. If he could explain. Why hadn't he explained? Hadn't he had all these years to explain? And I've never heard a word of explanation, not a word of all this. Why should I first learn of Frank Welney only after this libel's published? Well, I'm his wife. Couldn't he trust me? Didn't I wait for him, wait and wait and wait? Haven't I given him everything all these years because I thought he was Mark?
Lady Lutton, supposing your husband could prove he was Sir Mark.
If he could prove. If he could prove.
Sir Wilfrid, perhaps we can wait a few minutes for Lady Lutton to recover before you continue your cross-examination.
I don't propose to ask any more questions, my lord.
Nor I, my lord. And I shall call no further evidence.
Then that closes the case for the defense.
Yes, my lord.
Well, Sir Wilfrid, have you decided to adopt any particular course?
The position, my lord, is very difficult. At any rate, I fear I must yield to my client's insistent desire that I should exercise the right your lordship reserved to me of recalling the plaintiff on the question of the uniform jacket, which was produced by Dr. Flodon yesterday.
I cannot prevent the plaintiff going into the box again.
My lord, there are times when a client can insist on controlling his own litigation, and I feel bound to add that Sir Eric Fulsham is genuinely anxious about the mental consequence if he's not allowed to do so.
Oh, very well. He has the right to give his evidence on that one point.
Sir Mark, will you go into the box?
I think I should be all right. Thank you.
He can, if he likes, give his evidence sitting down.
No, thank you, my lord. I prefer to stand.
Sir Mark, you had an opportunity yesterday of seeing the uniform jacket produced by Dr. Flodon.
Yes.
And you admit it's a Rifle Brigade jacket.
Most certainly. I have no doubt it was mine.
Silence! Silence!
You identify it as yours?
Yes, my lord.
Do you mean your uniform was on number 15 when he was found by Dr. Flodon?
Certainly.
I should very much like to know why.
I'm coming to that, my lord. Sir Mark,
yes?
Will you tell the jury how Sir Mark Lutton's jacket came to be on numero 15?
Yes, Sir Wilfrid. Buckingham was speaking the truth when he said he went foraging that night, leaving Welney and me together. He was away a very long time. We thought he'd been caught. So Welney went to look for him.
How was it Welney went to look for Buckingham instead of his companion, Sir Mark Lutton?
I always had to keep in the background, my lord. I was the only one in uniform.
I see, yes.
Welney went to look for Buckingham. He was away for hours, too. At last I began to think he'd been caught or shot. There were a lot of odd shots going off that night. When neither Welney nor Buckingham came back, I began to creep along the edge of the wood towards the town. Suddenly, round a corner, I bumped into a German soldier. He was as frightened as I was. Without a word, he fired from his hip and shot off my finger. That is when I lost that.
I hadn't understood it was as late in the escape as that.
Yes, my lord. That's why Buckingham was speaking the truth again when he said he never knew I had lost a finger.
Tell the jury, Sir Mark, what happened then.
Yes. I dashed in and I wrenched the rifle out of the man's hands. He put up his arm to save himself, and I brought the butt down on his head. He dropped like a stone.
Yes.
It was horrible. Horrible. I hate to remember it even now.
Yes. Please go on.
The killing of a German soldier by an English prisoner of war 40 miles behind the German lines would not be treated as death in action.
I see, yes, I dare say. Go on.
It seemed my only chance of getting through was to get out of my uniform and get into a German one, so I changed uniforms with the man I killed. I thought I'd killed. Of course, I took everything out of my own pockets. Then I dashed off for all I was worth. And if I hadn't made the change, I should never have got through.
Is there anything else you wish to add, Sir Mark?
I'm sorry, Sir Wilfrid, I didn't quite catch...
I'm so sorry. Is there anything else you would wish to add?
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, only this. Unless someone changed the uniform again after I got away, that poor devil, whom Dr. Flodon saved, is not an Englishman at all. He is that German soldier.
Thank you, Sir Mark.
Yes, thank you. And Mr. Foxley, I'm sure I needn't remind counsel of your experience that I cannot allow any general cross-examination. It must be confined entirely to this new evidence.
Of course, my lord. Now, are you quite sure, witness, that you're fit for cross-examination?
Yes, I think
Now,
so.
what I mean is, whatever view the jury may take, there is no doubt that you've had a great shock.
Yes, I've had a great shock.
However, will you answer this question?
I'll try.
When you first gave evidence, did I hear you take the oath?
Of course.
To tell the truth, the whole truth?
Yes.
Why didn't you tell the whole truth then?
I thought I did.
You thought you did. Didn't I ask you question after question after question about the circumstances of your separation from Welney that night at Stavellow?
Yes.
Why didn't we hear a word of this encounter with a German soldier?
I didn't think it mattered.
You didn't think it mattered. And why no word of that wonderful quick change of uniform?
I tell you, I didn't think it mattered then.
Then? If it was true, why suppress it?
Can't you see it was only yesterday? I knew that poor devil was still alive. I might be Welney, or Welney might be me. What happened to that German could make no difference till you produced that jacket.
Now, when did you first tell this story to anyone?
This morning, to Sir Wilfrid, when I saw that not only my counsel, but my own wife didn't believe I was myself.
I can understand their embarrassment. You never mentioned it to anyone before today?
No, never.
Did you never tell your wife?
No, I never told it to my wife. She's never heard it before I gave this evidence today.
And why not?
I didn't want her to associate me with that sort of thing.
What sort of thing?
I did what I did in hot blood.
What did you do to that German of yours?
I told you.
Have you? Have you? Now, what are you keeping back?
The way I killed him.
I have a note of what you said. I brought the butt down on his head. He dropped like a stone.
Yes. Yes.
Now, is that all the truth? I want an answer. Have we got it all even now?
No. Not all. Not all. All right, I'll tell you.
At last.
My first blow smashed his arm. He gave a dreadful scream. More noises would have brought up some of his friends. He was down, he was helpless. I saw red. I had to finish him off. I simply had to. If I was to have a chance of getting away, getting home to see my wife.
Take your time, take your time.
How many more blows?
Oh, how can I tell? Blow after blow till the head was a pulp and the face was... I can't think of it. I won't think of it. I've tried to forget it all these years. I won't remember it. I've never told my wife. I couldn't tell my wife. There was always that between us, keeping us apart. Oh, she told the truth, all right. It was the truth. Never since the war, never have I been the Mark Lutton she promised to marry.
So we seem to be right. You are a man capable of a brutal murder.
Did you ever serve in the war, Mr. Foxley?
No. But, well...
Learned counsel do not expose themselves to interrogation when they are cross-examining.
If your lordship please. Now, can you produce a shred of evidence that would substantiate your story?
No. It depends on my word.
With nothing to support it. Now, what became of the German uniform? You say you escaped it.
I burnt it when I reached our lines. I wanted to forget.
That seems unfortunate. It might have given the name or regimental number of your mythical German.
I can give you the poor devil's name and regimental number.
What?
Here it is, on his identity disc.
Let me see it, please. Thank you. Members of the jury, this appears to be the identity disc of a German soldier giving his name as Karl Geist and his regimental number. Sir Mark, yes. You swear this was on the body of the German soldier whose uniform you exchanged for your own that night at Stavellow?
I do, my lord. After Dr. Flodon's evidence yesterday, I drove specially home last night to Norfolk to get it.
And apart from your own evidence, there is nothing to prove it originally belonged to this particular German soldier of the millions of German soldiers involved in the war?
Apart from my sworn word, no, my lord. Nothing.
It seems to me it becomes increasingly difficult for a jury to give a verdict in this case.
Let me say this here and now, my lord. I only want the verdict of the jury for the sake of one person. And that person is my son. I've already lost the only verdict I wanted for myself. My wife.
Silence! Silence!
But I want my son to know that I was entitled to be his father.
I have nothing more to ask, Sir Mark.
Witness, you can leave the box if you feel strong enough. Well, Mr. Foxley, are you going to address the jury?
My lord,
My lord,
I'm in some difficulty.
my lord, something has just come back to me.
What is it?
May I just look at my jacket? my lord?
Certainly, but I don't see how it can help us. Now, Usher, pass the jacket to the plaintiff.
Thank you. Now, my lord, will someone lend me a knife?
A knife? What for?
I want to cut something I sewed in the back of my breast pocket.
Something you sewed in?
Yes. 2 50-mark notes and
I
a
don't
photograph.
know that we can let you mutilate an exhibit.
My lord, I have admitted it is my jacket, and you can see there where I've sewn it up. Now, if I might have a knife to cut these stitches.
You may. Who has a pocket knife?
I have, my lord. Usher. Now, you see, before I started to escape from Hobheim with Welney and Buckingham, I wasn't too sure of my companions or what might happen to things in my pockets. I don't seem to have been far wrong. So I sewed inside the lining of this breast pocket a photograph and 2 50-mark notes. And, yes, they're still here. And here is the photograph. Yes, this is the photograph. Now I remember. Yes, I remember. It all begins to come back to me, my lord. This is the first photograph my wife gave me when we were first engaged. I took it with me to France. I always had it in that pocket.
Usher, will you pass me that photograph, please? Thank you. I see something is written on it. To darling...
Need that be read aloud, my lord?
I think it should. Members of the jury, on this photograph these words are written. To darling Tony, with all my love, Enid.
With all my love.
I don't quite understand the inscription. Does your wife call you Tony?
Oh, my lord, never.
Then why is Tony written here?
It's so long since I saw that photo, I remember. Yes, I remember. She used to call me Tony at first. Then I think my people didn't like it, so it was dropped. I forget when. Sometime before the war.
It's true, my lord, quite true.
Can you recall why she chose the name of Tony?
It's beginning to come back to me, yes. That photograph was taken at Eton on the day of our engagement.
Yes, I see it's taken by an Eton photographer.
Yes, my wife was there with her brother. That's when we got engaged. That very afternoon we went to the photographer.
Yes, but why the name Tony?
She heard all my friends calling me Anthony, so she said she'd call me Tony.
True.
Anthony, why should they call you Anthony when your name is Mark?
A play on Mark Antony, I suppose. Oh. You see, I was always Anthony Lutton at Eton. My lord,
Take your time, Sir Mark, take your time.
I feel, my lord, it's become my duty to take a most unusual course. My clients are far too responsible to want to snatch a verdict.
Really, Mr. Foxley? I am glad to hear that.
My junior, Mr. Hemsby, had the advantage of being educated at Eton, which, your lordship may know, is a very large school. He tells me that whilst he has no recollection of being there with a Mark Lutton and can't recognize the plaintiff, he remembers perfectly well that there was a boy there in his time known as Anthony Lutton.
We seem to be getting rather away from normal evidence.
What did you say that name was, Mr. Foxley?
My junior's name, Hemsby.
Hemsby.
Yes.
Hemsby. Hemsby. I can't recognize Mr. Hemsby in his wig. Should I be allowed, my lord, to ask Mr. Hemsby to take it off?
I have no objection if Mr. Hemsby hasn't.
Not at all, my lad. There.
Ah. You rode bow in the school 8 for the ladies' plate, my last half. I've got it. Loppy Hemsby.
I beg your pardon?
A loppy, my lord.
That's right, my lad.
You'd better resume your wig, Mr. Hemsby.
My lord, it's abundantly clear the plaintiff has been the victim of an appalling mistake. If your lordship will give me 2 minutes to talk to my learned friend, Sir Wilfrid, I think the jury will not be troubled in this case.
I think 1 minute should be ample, Mr. Foxley.
If your lordship pleases. 1 minute.
Sir Mark, you may leave the box.
Thank you very much, my lord.
1 or 2 cases we've got to look at, possibly.
Sir Mark, come here. I must have you here. I'm just speaking to Mr. Foxley.
I leave it to you, Sir Wilfrid. I must go to my wife.
Sir Mark, you must come
I don't care. I don't care. Oh, Enid,
Mark,
my darling.
Mark, dear.
Ah, well. My lord...
well, Sir Wilfrid?
My lord, I can't get any assistance from me client.
I had noticed that, Sir Wilfrid.
Which leaves me to the tender mercies of my friend, Mr. Foxley.
You mean my generous instinct, Sir Wilfrid?
Have you agreed?
We have.
We have, my lord.
I am sure the jury, who have been most patient in this case, would like to know the figure of Mr. Foxley's generous instincts. Yes, Sir Wilfrid?
I've agreed to accept a quite nominal sum.
Nominal?
Yes, my lord. Under the amazing circumstances, the nominal sum of £25,000.
And the fullest possible apology and a complete withdrawal of every allegation by the Daily Gazette.
Your lordship will appreciate that this action was not brought to recover money.
Quite clearly not. And I hope something more than money has been recovered by this trial. I cannot believe that the merciful providence which allowed Sir Mark and Lady Lutton to come together after all the dangers of the war will not prevail to bring them through this final tribulation.
That was Libel by Edward Wool, adapted for broadcasting by Molly Greenhalgh. The part of Mr. Justice Tuttington was played by Harcourt Williams and the associate by Hamilton Dice. The plaintiff, Sir Mark Lutton, by James McKechnie. Sir Wilfrid Kelling, KC MP, counsel for the plaintiff, by Norman Shelley, and Mr. Thomas Foxley, KC, counsel for the defendants, by Donald Wolfett. The junior counsel were Mr. William Vale by David Peel and Mr. George Hemsby by Donald Gray. The part of Lady Lutton was played by Catherine Salkeld. Patrick Buckingham by John Farrell, and Dr. Émile Flordon by Austin Trevor. The play's production was by Raymond Rakes.
Colin Dexter's The Silent World of Nicholas Quinn, with John Shrapnel as Inspector Morse and Robert Glenister as Sergeant Lewis, starring Richard Pascoe and Meg Davis. Dramatized for radio by Guy Merrick.
There they come, fool. They treat me like a simpleton. They don't mean to, they do it despite themselves. They don't realise that I notice. They imagine that if one sense is dull, so do all the others. Why me? Why my whole life, and why now? This is somewhere I could have been happy. I could have found friendship. I could have found love. Why has it been ruined for me? Why am I fated to be always apart? always alone. I heal with me eyes. That is my curse. That and the honesty. Can I forget what I know? Can I live with it? Can I... What? Oh, God, what's... Please. Please help. Please.
29. One more. That's doing you good. Cling on to that. Now just touch the hole of the broom and
Sir? Sir?
You all right, sir? What the hell are you doing here, Lewis?
Track you down, sir. Would you like a handout?
No, I bloody well would not. I'm perfectly capable of getting myself out of the...
There you go, sir. Steps might have been easier.
Lewis, do you want to go in your suit? What do you mean you tracked me down?
Oh, a bit of detective work. Went over to the Six Bells. Barman said you hadn't been in lunchtimes all last week. And then yesterday you popped in for a quick one around 3 and you had wet hair. So I thought about it, given that it wasn't raining yesterday.
Well, that's brilliant, Lewis.
Thank you, sir. It was really the underlying motive that clinched it. On the face of it, you're not much of a one for exercise. But then again, you might have felt you'd reached an age that...
That what, Lewis?
Well, a lot of men suffer coronaries, particularly if they're overweight. I mean, you might feel better in yourself if...
Lewis, why are you here?
Chief wanted you urgently, sir. We've got a body.
Suicide? Nothing to contradict that, is there? With the crowd outside the curtains, the press are going to be on the blower inside half an hour. No reason I can see for the good citizens of Oxford to be alarmed. Medical opinion?
As a method of doing away with yourself, it's not unknown.
Good. Fingerprints.
Just here's on the bottle and the glass.
Excellent. So the sooner you ship him out or some air in, the better it'll be for...
Lewis, yes, I decided that losing a few pounds wouldn't do me any harm.
Morse, how gracious of you. To what do we owe the pleasure?
I was on my lunch break, sir.
Well, if you'd spent it in the pub as per normal, we'd know where to find you, wouldn't we? Poor bugger's named Quinn. Colleague found him when he failed to turn up for work. Fill in the details, would you? And give me a preliminary report by 5.
Certainly, sir.
God, poor bugger's right. Knew all about it, whatever it was.
Hydrocyanic acid. Cyanide to you.
Ah, a pathologist with the common touch.
Diluted in a glass of sherry. Drank about half of it.
Any sign of a container?
For the cyanide? Not so far, sir.
Check the kitchen, Lewis.
Sir?
Were those curtains closed when you arrived?
No, Morse. We drew them so we'd have less light to see by. And we lit the gas fire to make it stuffier. I'm turning him over now.
So, he sipped his envenomed cup, slumped out of the armchair, and died on the floor. When exactly?
Exactly, I won't know till I get him back to the lab. Friday, sometime.
4 days ago. He comes home from work, finds his home life no less depressing than his job, and ends it all. Simple and tragic as that. Well?
I'm not a detective, Morse. But if you can smell anything at all apart from incipient decomposition, you should take the top off the sherry bottle.
No immediate sign of anything that looks like you might have had poison in it, sir, but...
Take an inventory of the whole bloody flat, Lewis, and leave me alone for a moment.
Yes, sir.
Well?
The cyanide wasn't just in the glass, was it?
And I'll tell you something else that might be of interest.
Yeah?
Our friend here was at least partially deaf.
How'd you figure that one out?
By asking myself a very simple question. Why else would he wear a hearing aid?
Clearly, this is the most dreadful loss. Not only to us personally, but to the Foreign Examination Syndicate as a whole. In the short time he was here, Nicholas had already more than proved his worth. I really can't think of anything else to say at the moment. It has come as such a shock.
Has his family been told?
The police were making arrangements while I was at the station.
They asked me if he had any other friends here in Oxford.
Any other friends? However we all feel now, we can hardly pretend we extended the hand of friendship to him.
That's not quite fair. For obvious reasons, he wasn't the easiest man to approach.
So we left him alone until, in his desperation...
Oh, come on, Ogilvy. If you're trying to say we're in... Oh, please, Monica. Please, gentlemen. This is no time for recrimination. Even self-recrimination. We must remember Nicholas Quinn for what he was. An esteemed colleague and someone who, given time, would surely have become as important to us as we are to each other.
Quite the best. That's 143.
If we said 150, could I have a head on it?
What?
Chief Inspector Morse, Thames Valley Constabulary.
Oh.
Look, man lived over the way, early 30s, beard, receding hair.
Topped himself, they're saying. Is that right?
Was he ever in here?
This is a music pub, isn't it?
It's a matter of opinion.
Look, live music every night. And he was deaf, wasn't he? Saw him on the street, had a hearing aid. Nearly ran under a car once. What would he want in here?
Yeah. If it was my local, I'd drink at home too. Ah, Lewis, might I recommend the tomato juice?
Full inventory of the flats.
Oh, very efficient. Have a stool.
No, thank you, sir. I think I'll be off.
Lewis, is everything all right? Have I upset you in some way?
Not at all, sir. I'm delighted to do the sort of work a probationary constable might find tedious.
Oh, yes, I see. Look, you'll have to forgive me, Lewis. Perhaps I wasn't in the best of moods this afternoon. First you give me the Sherlock Holmes treatment, and then I'm outgunned by a smart Alec pathologist.
Just because he was on the scene first?
No, because he spotted the vital clue that I'm afraid makes your inventory completely useless.
I'm not with you, sir.
There are two things everybody knows about cyanide, Lewis. One is that it smells of bitter almonds, the other that it's highly toxic. Agreed?
Yeah, I suppose so, sir.
Now, if you were minded to kill yourself, I think you'd want it over and done with as quickly as possible, wouldn't you? Unless, of course, you were Socrates and had Plato on hand completing your memoirs. But for most people, though, the sooner the better.
And did Quinn take a long time to die?
I doubt it. But had he wanted to kill himself, he'd simply have dumped the cyanide in a glass, poured some sherry on it, rather than mix up a full litre of lethal Amontillado cocktail.
Are you saying...
I'm saying that whoever put the poison in that sherry bottle wasn't Nicholas Quinn. Which means, in short, that we are dealing with a murder. Come on. Let's find a decent pub on the way home.
Someone poisoned the bottle of sherry. Quinn opened it, poured himself a drink, and died.
In that order.
Yeah, but you said yourself, the other thing everybody knows about cyanide is that it smells of bitter almonds.
What do bitter almonds smell like?
Well,
precisely. Anyway, just because Quinn was deficient in one sense doesn't mean all the others were particularly sharp. He probably tossed it back without sniffing it.
Yeah, but wait a minute, there were only his prints on the bottle. And just the one glass out of it. So if he'd bought the bottle...
or been given it...
he'd still have opened it himself. You'd have a hard job resealing a bottle of sherry after you poisoned it. Even these supermarket ransom nutters couldn't do that.
Something of a poser, I agree. Well, apply your mind to it, Lewis.
Me?
Unless I'm much mistaken, you feel my attitude towards your talents is overbearing and dismissive.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Well, you should. Because you're right. Perhaps I am prone to hog the glory. Humility is not the easiest of virtues to assume. But I would like you to take the leading hand in this murder investigation, Lewis. Good night.
Good night, sir.
Murdered? But he can't. And who? Was there a burglary or...
Not as far as we're aware, sir.
Why would anyone want to kill Nicholas Quinn? Inspector...
As Sergeant Lewis said, Dr. Bartlett, the more we discover about his life, the closer we'll come to answering that question.
Quinn was the most inoffensive man I've ever met. I just
Dr. Bartlett, could you tell us something about his work here? In fact, something about the organisation as a whole.
What? Oh, well, the foreign examination syndicate exists to set and mark exams for overseas GCSE and A-level candidates.
It's part of the university, then?
Not exactly. It has a governing board made up of dons to whom I, as secretary, am answerable. And profits are distributed amongst the colleges.
Does the syndicate make a lot of money?
A reasonable amount. We have to sell ourselves very hard to stay ahead of the other examining bodies.
Why don't you just make your questions easier?
I beg your pardon?
Well, if the questions were easier than the ones the other examining boards set, students would choose yours and you'd make more money, wouldn't you?
Sergeant, I don't think you quite understand. Pupils and their schools must want to be examined by the Oxford Syndicate. It's a question of prestige in their own countries.
Oh, I see. Anyway, Nicholas Quinn, what was his job here?
He looked after history and English. He had a degree in one and had taught at school level in the other, which made him ideal. There are only 5 graduates. That's what we call the academic as opposed to the administrative staff. So we each need more than one speciality.
And who are the other graduates, sir?
Donald Martin, who found Quinn's body. He takes care of all social sciences. Philip Ogleby is maths and sciences proper. Monica Height is a linguist. Most other things fall to me.
You all got on with Quinn, did you?
Yes. We were very close to him. I mean, in some ways, we were all that he... Murdered? I just can't believe it.
You were all he had. Is that what you were about to say, sir?
The syndicate, it's like a family. Working together. Day in, day out.
We'll need to do a formal interview with all the graduates, sir. Including yourself.
As I said in my statement, Dr. Bartlett asked me to visit Quinn's flat when he failed to turn up for work for the second day running. The curtains were closed, and there was no answer to his door. I went round the back where there's a row of garages. His car was in one of them. I thought I might as well knock on the back door as well. Then I tried the handle, and it was open.
Must have been quite a shock for you, Mr. Martin.
Well, statistics about mortality, the sort of thing I set questions about all the time, but I'd never seen a dead body in my life. I don't think it's something I shall ever forget.
Why did Dr. Bartlett choose you to call on Quinn?
I don't know. I only wish he hadn't. None of us knew Quinn well.
Really? I had the impression...
I mean, we were on pleasant enough terms, but one was never sure, with his deafness.
No, of course. And tell me, what were you doing last Friday evening?
I had dinner at home with my wife. We neither of us went out.
What time do you normally arrive home from work?
Round 6:30, if I'm not working late. Which I wasn't, as it happens.
To your knowledge, Quinn had made few, if any, personal contacts since he came down to Oxford.
He'd only been working here 3 months.
But to your knowledge?
No.
How could he manage his work here, given his disablement?
Surprisingly well. His hearing had been damaged since birth, apparently, and so he'd learned to cope. But no doubt it was a considerable relief after school teaching.
So he must have been grateful for the appointment.
Yes, I think he was.
Even if he was being poorly paid.
What do you mean?
Dingy flat, clapped-out old car. Quinn was hardly rolling in money.
Not all public servants receive comfortable salaries, Inspector. Academics, I think you'll find, rarely live a life of luxury.
Mr. Philip Ogleby. And you've been working at the syndicate...
Oh, longer than anyone can remember, Sergeant.
Would you have said Quinn was the suicidal type?
I've been given to understand that you're not investigating a suicide.
We are investigating a death that was intended to look like suicide. Whoever was responsible for it must have known Quinn wasn't a happy man.
And who do you think was responsible for it?
At the moment, we have no idea, Mr. Ogleby. My question was...
A very good one, Sergeant. No, I wouldn't have said he was happy.
And did he ever confide in you?
Yes, once.
What about?
That's my business.
I don't think...
If I were you, Sergeant, I'd be asking myself a far more obvious question. Cyanide is something of a specialized murder weapon. You'd have to know where to get it and how to use it. You would need some inside knowledge.
You're a chemist by training, aren't you, Mr. Ogleby?
That I am. That I am.
Come in.
Good morning, Miss Height?
As it says on the door.
Yes, well, yes. Chief Inspector Morse.
Please have a seat.
Thank you.
Dr. Bartlett has told us of your suspicions. I really can't believe...
No, well, murder is often very hard to credit.
But of all people, there was simply no harm whatever in Nicholas.
You were on first-name terms?
Why not?
I don't know, the syndicate seems a fairly formal sort of place.
I liked him. I think that's allowable within a working relationship.
Well, yes, of course. Look, could I ask, did he have a soft spot for you?
What do you mean by that?
Well, I perhaps oughtn't to be so blunt, but...
Do go ahead.
Well, in the cerebral atmosphere of the syndicate, you are an attractive woman, and Quinn might have... Well, that's not to say you wouldn't be an attractive woman in any other atmosphere.
I'm not sure I follow you, Inspector.
What I'm getting at is, I merely...
Thought all female academics were aging spinsters. Do you look like a typical policeman?
No idea.
Apart from the elbow patches on your jacket, that is. Inspector, I have no idea what Nicholas felt about me. I only hope he realized that I admired his courage in carrying on a normal life despite his affliction.
Well, quite. Yes, good. Look, I'm afraid I have to ask you what seems like another impertinent question, but, what were you doing last Friday night?
Was that when he died?
Seems so, yes.
I was at home all evening with my daughter. She could confirm that. You take the word of a 16-year-old, I'm sure.
16?
I married young, Inspector. It was a mistake. It didn't last.
Well, these things happen. We might have to speak to you again, Miss Height, over the course of the next few days, so...
I'm at your disposal, Inspector.
Yes? Well, good.
You have the assurance of Sergeant Dixon, madam, that we shall make every effort to find Timmy.
Tommy?
Tommy. We do a lot of missing tortoise work. Thames Valley's finest will be on the case.
He can't have gone far.
I wouldn't mind, but it was a rabbit last week, sir.
I'd like to speak to whoever's dealing with the death of Nicholas Quinn.
I see, and your name is?
Roop. Dr. Charles Roop. I'm on the governing board of the Foreign Examination Syndicate. I read about Quinn's death in the paper, and I think I may have some important information.
Of what nature would that be, sir?
I may well have been the last person to see him alive. I also have certain facts regarding his appointment to the Foreign Examination Syndicate. The newspaper piece said there'd be an inquest next Monday. I therefore assume that Quinn's death is in some way unnatural.
Well, I really couldn't comment, sir. I'm only the desk sergeant.
Let me tell you this. However Quinn died, there's some blame to be attached, and I don't want to see the guilty party walking away scot-free.
Who the hell did he speak to? How the bloody hell did Quinn tell? Oh, God.
Assalamu alaikum. مكتب الاستثمار الدولي المتميز.
Yes, George Bland, please.
هذا واحد بيتكلم انجليزي يلا. جورج براون.
No, I'd like to speak to Mr. George Bland.
حتى بقول لك جورج براون.
Oh, for God's sake. Yes. Ogilvy. What do you want?
I want to know everything you know about Quinn's death, Bartlett.
Most of this must belong to Quinn's predecessor in the job. I mean, if Quinn had only worked there 3 months, he could hardly have amassed this much bunk.
I wouldn't bet on it. GCSE English, draft papers, first proofs, first revises, second revises.
I reckon I could pick up a few quick exam passes here, sir.
End up an overqualified pen pusher like Bartlett?
Yeah, perhaps not. Quinn was a curiously anonymous sort, wasn't he? Even at the flat, there was hardly anything personal at all.
Got used to going through life that way, I suppose. People ignored him. He tended to ignore himself. Oh, hello.
What's that, sir?
It's a desk diary. He was hardly a budding peeps, was he? Meeting.
Anything for last Friday, sir?
No. Something for the Thursday, though. Ring FDS 442836.
I'll check the phone number out, shall I, sir?
If it is a phone number, not a set of vital statistics. Talking of which, Lewis, did I mention that Miss Monica Height is...
Sir, did you see this?
What?
In the back of the diary, this envelope. Strictly private and confidential, Mr. G. Bland.
Stealing other people's mail?
Yes, from abroad, sir. 3rd of March postmark, but that's all I can make out. The rest all squiggly lines.
Arabic, I think you'll find, Lewis. What does the letter say?
Oh, it's in English, at any rate. Al Jamara Education Department. Dear George,
Many thanks for your summer examinations package. All entry forms ready for dispatch Friday the 20th or at latest 21st. Sincerely yours, another squiggle.
Interesting.
Really, sir? Seems pretty routine to me.
Exactly. So why is it strictly private and confidential? And why was it in Quinn's diary?
Oh, sorry to bother you, sir. Did you get my note about a Dr. Roop? I left it on your desk.
In that case, it's under 300 weight of questions about Dickens and Shakespeare. What did he want?
Said he was a friend of Quinn's and probably the last person to see him alive. Funny thing is, I've just had a woman on the line who claims exactly the same.
Sudden access of popularity. Details, please, Dixon.
It's George Bland. Well, there's no option. You had to kill him. It was the only possible way of keeping it secret. And if anyone else comes anywhere near, you may have to do it again. Hope you didn't mind coming over to the college. I'm due to start a lecture, but it never does the students harm to build up a sense of expectation.
I never remember any of my old lecturers beginning on time. So, you were a friend of Quinn's, Dr. Roop?
Well, a friend might be putting it a little strongly, but ally, certainly. We were both from the same part of the country, Bradford. I'd never met him before he came down to Oxford, but Yorkshiremen tend to stick up for each other.
So I'd heard. How did you stick up for Quinn, exactly?
By landing him his job, more or less. I'd been on the governing board of the Foreign Examinations Syndicate for a year or so. The meeting where Quinn was eventually appointed, he was one of 6 candidates. For me, Yorkshireman or not, he was easily the best qualified. However, not everyone was of the same opinion.
His deafness counted against him?
You would have thought in these days of equal opportunities. Some people might as well be living 100 years ago.
You wouldn't be referring to Dr. Bartlett by any chance?
To be honest, we've never seen eye to eye. He wants the syndicate to rest on Oxford tradition. I say, if it's going to be the best, we should make our syllabuses relevant to the modern world.
History questions about the Gulf War, you mean?
Well, I suppose so, for example.
I get the impression that a lot of the syndicate's business is in the Middle East, is that right?
Well, it's where much of the world's wealth is concentrated.
And, Al-Jamara. Does the syndicate have a contract there?
I'm not sure. I think it might. That will be a question for Bartlett or his staff.
Of course. So you say you saw Quinn last Friday afternoon?
Yes. That is, I saw more evidence of him than I saw of anybody else at the syndicate.
I don't understand.
Well, I've been in London all morning with my publisher. On the train journey back, had annotated some reports for the syndicate and had to drop them off.
What time was that?
I caught a taxi from the station. It would have been about 4:30. When I arrived at the syndicate, there were admin staff upstairs, of course, but none of the graduates were in their office. Then I bumped into Noakes.
Noakes?
The caretaker. We decided the best thing was to leave the notes for Bartlett when he came back.
A bit unusual to find no one there at 4:30 in the afternoon, isn't it?
Very. But as I say, Quinn was obviously somewhere close by. His anorak was on the back of his chair, and I noticed his car in the car park. I would have hung on to talk to him, but I had a 5 o'clock tutorial back here.
And, what would you have talked to him about?
Well, I asked him how he was getting on. Knowing that Bartlett hadn't wanted him there in the first place,
Do you think Bartlett was capable of taking it out on Quinn personally?
Look, it probably sounds as though I'm being the usual bitchy academic. But yes, I think if Nicholas Quinn was driven to suicide, Bartlett could have been one of the prime causes.
As it happens, suicide isn't the possibility we're looking at.
But I thought, an inquest? You don't mean...
Just how vindictive do you think the secretary of the syndicate is, Dr. Roop?
Oh, no. Not that. No. No.
Poor Mr. Quinn. I couldn't believe it when I read the newspaper.
So you weren't exactly a friend of his?
I was friendly with him. I'm friendly with everyone I do cleaning for. Excuse me not asking you in, but my Fred's coughing something rotten.
No, I'm fine just here. And you always clean Quinn's flat on Friday afternoons?
Between 4 and 6, regular. Except last Friday, because of Fred's bronchitis, I had to break off and go to the chemist. And I thought, when Mr. Quinn gets back at 5:30, when we normally have our little chat, he'll wonder where I am, won't he?
So you didn't actually see him that day?
Well, what I did was I left him a note saying I was going to finish the hoovering. Left it on the sideboard and he must have read it.
How do you know?
Because when I got back from the chemist, it was gone, and he'd left me a note in its place.
A regular correspondence. Can you remember what Quinn's note said?
I don't need to. I've got it here. Kept it in my pinny, you see.
Just off shopping, shan't be long, NQ.
Quality supermarket's open till 9 of a Friday night.
And you didn't see him when he returned to the shop?
No, I finished up and left by 7. Wanted to get home with the Linctors. Not that it seems to be doing much good.
Can I keep this note, Mrs. Evans?
No good to me, is it? Poor Mr. Quinn. I used to love our little natters, I really did.
Who, when, how, why, and where? Those are what you always say are the classic questions, sir. Well, where is obviously in his flat. How? By cyanide poisoning. And when? Sometime after Mrs. Evans left at 7 o'clock on Friday night. Though how, whoever it was, managed to get the cyanide into the bottle, that's the shaky point, isn't it? Sir?
What's the time, Lewis?
5:30.
Then perhaps we could have a drop ourselves for inspirational purposes. There's a half-litre of whiskey in the top drawer of the filing cabinet.
I thought you were sworn to the healthy life, sir.
Well, the efficacy of that has yet to be proven, Lewis. Here, use the coffee cups.
Well, if it's all the same to you, I'll abstain. The hard stuff has never really been...
Do as you're told, man.
Sir?
So, Quinn spends all day at the syndicate, except that he wasn't in his office when Root called, but there was evidence that he was around and about, unlike his colleagues. Cheers.
Cheers.
And you're convinced that when he returns home that evening, he had a visitor. And that visitor is the murderer.
Well, it has to be, don't it, sir?
What do you think of the whiskey? Single malt.
Oh, it's very nice, sir.
Very nice. Anyway, the main outstanding problem would then be who that visitor was and what on earth they had against him. We don't know a lot about Quinn, but we do know he wouldn't say boo to a goose. However, that isn't quite the point at issue.
Then what is, sir?
The fact that you're dead, Lewis.
I beg your pardon, sir?
You've finished your whiskey. If I poisoned the bottle, you'd be a chalk mark on the floor by now.
Yeah, but so would you, sir.
Aha, no, I haven't touched mine. I raised it to my lips, but I haven't swallowed any. And if I'd wiped the bottle before you came into the office, it would only have your prints on it because you are the one who poured the drinks out.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So now I pour my drink away, wash up the cup, and there is no evidence of a second person present at all.
But it's not quite a parallel situation, is it, sir? I mean, I'm in your office and you told me where to find the bottle. We're saying that someone brought a bottle round to Quinn's flat and gave it to him.
We or you?
Have you got another theory, sir?
Where's Al-Jamara, Lewis?
No idea, sir. Hello, Chief Inspector Morse's office.
It's an atlas on one of those shelves. Ah, yes.
Yes, of course. Who's speaking, please? Sir, it's Monica Height.
Is it now? Look, take this and improve your education. Hello? Morse?
Let's see.
Yes?
Alipur, India,
What you?
Alistati,
No, that's fine.
Greece, Al-Jamara, country, map 23.
Well, Lewis. What do you make of that?
Just the same, sir. Oh, yeah. Yes, there. That little pink one, just to the right of the second A in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, yeah, jolly. I meant about the phone call.
Oh, what does she want?
Ms. Monica Height would like to see me. This evening.
What for, sir?
Well, maybe she's got some information about the case. Or perhaps she's just after my body. I'll let you know.
The French syllabus for next year should include at least 2 works by contemporary writers, as well as the usual classic selection of poetry by authors such as Baudelaire, Verlaine, Mallarmé.
I love it when your lips do that.
What do you want, Donald?
Oh, that French business. Reminds me...
In the first place, you could knock before you come in. And in the second...
Did you do it?
Do what?
Did you phone him?
Yes, it's fixed.
Good. I know you'll see us through this. Won't you?
Come on, Morse. Stay good. Up and down, up and down. Al-Jamara. Arabic. Right to left. Top to bottom. No, but check it out. Check it out. 1 down, 29 to go. Got to reach the peak of condition.
Will you be eating?
Well, just a drink at the bar for the moment, though I'm sure perhaps...
Yes, I'd love to.
Really? Good. Well, why don't you leave us the menu and...
Gin and tonic, please.
And some sort of beer? Maybe low alcohol?
That's very abstemious of you, Inspector.
Well, I like to keep myself in trim, you know. So, Miss Height.
Monica, please.
Yes. What was it you wanted to tell me? I presume it's something to do with Nicholas Quinn.
You asked me yesterday at the syndicate whether Nicholas was interested in me. I said I had no idea.
And that wasn't true?
Well, not exactly. I got the impression fairly soon after he took up the job that he would have liked us to have a personal relationship.
I see. And you were unwilling?
When we first heard about his death, I felt as though... Well, I felt almost as though I'd pushed him to it.
Well, everyone assumed it was suicide.
Are you certain it wasn't?
I'm afraid so.
One gin and tonic and a low alcohol beer. There'll be a table free very shortly.
Oh, thank you. And how could you guess Quinn's intentions?
Well, that's not difficult for a woman, Inspector. Asking me out to drinks at lunchtime, coming into my office without a particularly good reason.
How did you deal with it?
Not very easily, as I said. I admired his courage, and I also felt sorry for him, but I couldn't bring myself to...
No, I understand.
I'm not sure you do, Inspector. You don't have enough information. You don't know enough about the syndicate.
What do you mean?
Well, there were 5 graduates at the syndicate. We work closely together. It's a bit like a family.
You're the second person who said that.
Am I? Well, there is one important way in which it differs. There are no blood ties.
And thus no taboos on incest.
If you want to put it that way.
Who? No, forget it. None of my business.
That's a very unusual thing for a detective to say.
Well, go on then. Who's the lucky man?
I think you can guess. It's hardly likely to be Dr. Bartlett or Philip Ogleby.
Donald Martin? But he's married, isn't he?
And that's why I called a halt to it. I couldn't go on.
And the other members of the syndicate knew about you and...
Apart from Nicholas, yes. It's not the sort of place you can keep things quiet.
Why did you want to tell me this?
Because you would have found out sooner or later anyway. And I thought I'd appear less reprehensible in your eyes if I admitted it first.
The table's ready now. Sir, madam?
Well, I'm not sure if...
Oh, can't we? I really was looking forward to spending the evening out. We can talk about other things. I'm sure we must have something in common. Please? I'd like to thank you for a very pleasant evening. And I hope you don't think absolutely the worst of me. I can't really explain why I fell for Donald Martin, except being on my own, needing someone, anyone. I wouldn't want his wife to find out. She doesn't have to, does she?
No. You said it was over. Since when, incidentally?
Since last week.
But last week?
We had a long talk about it, and...
When? Last week?
Well, last Friday.
But... Well, when last Friday?
Friday afternoon. I think perhaps you need to know a little more. This is my house. Could we talk about it over a coffee?
Hello, Inspector. Oh, Sergeant Lewis.
Oh, what? What time is it?
It's just after 11. Shouldn't you be at home with the wife? If you want to work shifts, you could transfer back into uniform.
Yeah, I fell asleep.
I'll get you a coffee before you drive back.
Yeah. No, wait a minute, George. Give me the benefit of your wisdom. It's the Quinn case.
Ah, Morse left you in charge, has he?
Well, not exactly. But he's given me a pretty free hand for once, and I don't want to make any mistakes. Look at this. It's Quinn's desk diary.
Ring FDS 442836.
Written on the day before he died. On the day before, in all likelihood, he invited somebody round for dinner who poisoned him.
Ah. You mean it might have been this FDS chap?
Well, I don't know about chat, but yeah, that was the theory I was working on.
Ah, so who is FDS?
Well, there was one obvious way to find out, and I tried it, but there was no answer.
Oh?
Then I realised something. In the first place, the phone number is written underneath, rather than next to the name, which wouldn't necessarily mean anything in itself, except that, well, the obvious thing struck me.
Which is?
Quinn was deaf. We don't know how deaf, probably not totally, but he'd hardly ring anyone unless they knew and were used to dealing with his handicap. He hadn't made any friends in Oxford, so where was he before he came here? Look.
Nicholas Quinn, BA, curriculum...
Vitae, yeah, go on.
For the past 3 years, I've been head of the English department at the Frederick Delia School, Bradford.
Stop there. Well?
Ah. FDS. It's not a person after all.
And presumably he would have remembered the phone number of the school he taught at and so had no need to write it down.
So the number is a separate entry. It's a game, this detection lark, isn't it?
Yeah, I was waiting to ring it again when I dropped off.
Oh, well, go on then. Unless you want me to.
No. Assuming it is an Oxford number after all, it would still have to be somebody he didn't mind appearing at his most vulnerable in front of.
Or else was just desperate to speak to.
Yeah, I suppose so, yes. But either way, whoever it is has got to be high on the suspect list.
Well?
No, there's still nobody...
Hello? Hello? Who is this? Oh, for God's sake.
Is that it? I thought at least you were going to ask them who they were.
I didn't need to. I only spoke to her on the phone a few hours ago. It was Monica Haidt.
What's the matter, Tom? Can't you sleep? What's worrying you?
Usual business. The syndicate hardly runs itself.
Shall I get you a drink?
No, thanks. I just can't help thinking about Quinn.
I know. It's terrible. Terrible.
And the police. What are they really going to solve?
They have to investigate.
And they'll destroy the syndicate. The years I put in building it up. It loses its integrity in the public eye. It loses everything.
But justice must be done. They need to find the murderer.
Well, that's not so difficult. I only need to ask. I'll have to tell them.
What do you mean? Tom?
I wasn't intending to bring the chief's wrath down on you, sir.
What?
Well, I was a bit worried, that was all. Are you sure you feel okay?
Keep asking me that. As it happens, I did have a couple of brandies, if you're not in training.
What did you make of Monica Haidt? I mean, did she have anything important to say? Sir?
Let's take a detour, shall we? I want to have another look at Quinn's flat before we go to the syndicate.
You understand, sir, I'm not saying Monica Haidt definitely killed
Look, that file on the back seat. Let's have another look at it.
Well, what in particular, sir?
The letter you found in the back of his diary. Read it again.
Oh, yeah, here it is. From Al-Jamara Education Department. Dear George, many thanks for your summer examinations package. All entry forms ready for dispatch Friday the 20th or at latest 21st. Sincerely...
The letter was postmarked the beginning of March, correct?
Yeah.
So now look in the diary under the 20th of March.
Yeah, but this is Quinn's diary, not George Bland's.
All diaries have the same calendar, Lewis. What day of the week was the 20th of March?
Thursday.
And April?
Sunday.
And just to be on the safe side?
May was a Tuesday. No, but I don't get it. I mean, what's the letter talking about?
Not what it appears to be, clearly. Not reading from left to right. But some of these awkward foreigners don't read that way, do they, Lewis? Take the words in a line from top to bottom.
Dear, many, summer.
Try the right-hand side of the page, Lewis.
Good God.
Well?
George, your package ready Friday 21st.
Signed, Squiggle. Someone with a lot of cash to throw around in Al-Jamara, presumably, if that's what the package contained. And I would be willing to bet...
Hold on, sir, you're going too fast for me. George Bland was Quinn's predecessor in the job, right?
Right.
And you're saying he was on the take? What for?
A lot of prestige in passing the syndicate's exams, Lewis. That's what Bartlett told us anyway.
So, Bland fiddled the marking?
Well, that I'm not sure of. Just yet.
But Quinn found him out, found this letter, and worked it out just the way you did.
Loneliness at the long distance, swimmer, Lewis. Here we are. Shay Quinn. Let's take another look around. Just as miserable as ever. Draw the curtains, would you, Lewis? But it'll be dark. It'll be as it was when Quinn was found. Now, light the gas fire, will you? Use the matches in the hearth. That's what Quinn would have done.
Oh. Not in its first youth, is it?
And then what do you do with the match?
Throw it in this waste paper bin, I suppose.
Where it should join one of its colleagues, the one Quinn actually used to light the fire when he returned from the supermarket after your Mrs. Evans had cleaned.
Yeah, you're right. There it is.
Wasn't on your inventory, though, was it, Lewis? Now,
There's something else in here, too, sir. Scrap of paper.
Really? Lewis, look, when I asked for an inventory to be made...
Ticket of some sort, or half of one. 102 Rear Lounge.
Let me see it. Well, that's interesting.
Well, he must have found it in his anorak pocket when he came in and thrown it away.
Possibly, but I doubt it. Lie on the floor, would you, Lewis?
Sir?
In front of the armchair. Just where Quinn was discovered. Go on. Now, what do you feel?
Stupid, to be honest.
But look at the fire. The flames have settled down. They were in a direct draft from under the door. Now you're blocking it. So if he tumbled from the chair, as his murderer would have us believe, he would have been sitting with his ankles in that draft.
The least of his problems, I should have thought.
Except that single men living alone are creatures of habit. Believe me, Lewis. I'd be willing to bet whatever you like that Quinn always sat in the armchair on the far side of the fire.
Could I get up now,
So
sir?
either he was being extraordinarily companionable by giving up his favourite chair, or else there was no other guest at all.
Sir?
No other guest, and no Quinn. Not here, not alive.
I don't... We know he was here, sir. The cleaning ladies...
The cleaning ladies saw a note he left her. Didn't see him, though, did she?
Well, what about the woman at the supermarket checkout?
Which woman?
Oh, I went there last night. I haven't had a chance to tell you. She saw Quinn around 6 o'clock.
She can't have.
I don't want to spoil your theory, sir. I know I was going it alone a bit.
I tell you, she can't have, Lewis. Quinn never entered this flat alive on Friday night. I'm convinced of that.
But then how...
Do you remember our experiment yesterday? I tricked you into drinking something which could have been poison, yes? As you pointed out, the trick only works if you're on my home territory.
Exactly, sir. But whose home territory could Quinn have been on, and when, if not on Friday night? The pathologist was reasonably
Damn
certain...
the pathologist! I'm in charge of this case, Lewis! Anyway, they can't fix it finer than a few hours at that distance.
With respect, sir, you seem to be dismantling everything we've built up.
Everything you built up, Lewis.
But you don't have anything solid to put in its place. Sir?
Let's go to the syndicate now, shall we, Lewis? There's somebody we haven't spoken to yet who could be important. Noakes, is it?
That's right.
Chief Inspector Morse, Sergeant Lewis. You got a moment?
Suppose so.
Well, I wondered in particular if I could ask you a couple of questions about last Friday afternoon.
You're the police. You've got the right.
Fine. Well, I've spoken to Dr. Roop, and he says when he arrived here about 4:30 with some papers for Dr. Bartlett, none of the graduates were in their offices.
Are you asking or telling?
I'm asking for confirmation.
Well, you've got it.
Might they have been elsewhere in the building? The toilet, for instance?
Well, all of them together.
Fair enough. Tell me, is it unusual for none of the graduates to be in the building?
Well, it can happen. They're supposed to leave a note on their desks if they go out.
Are they? And did any of them?
Only Quinn. And before you ask, I didn't read it.
When was the last time you saw any of them on that day?
I saw everyone milling around for the fire drill.
Fire drill? Anybody mention fire drill to you, Lewis?
No, sir.
Well, believe them, or believe me, or look in the register. Fire drill, 12 o'clock. Everyone out the front, present and correct. In the rain.
No, I believe you, Mr. Noakes.
Oh, Mr. Noakes now, is it?
Could I ask a question, sir? During the time the staff were absent, or at least out of their offices, were any of their cars here in the car park?
Only Mr. Quinn's.
And that remained here till the end of the afternoon?
It remained here until he drove it away around 5 o'clock.
But you didn't actually see him, though, did you, Mr. Noakes?
Oh, yes, I did. Even if it was raining. He tramped across here in his anorak, into the car, and off.
You're certain?
I just told you so, didn't I?
That seems like a clincher, doesn't it, sir? I mean, that's 2 people actually saw Quinn between 5 and 6. So he must have been alive when he reached his flat. Sir?
What?
I think you're developing selective hearing.
Everyone has an alibi for the evening, apart from Ogilvy. And he's trying so hard to incriminate himself with his hints about cyanide and his secret confidences from Quinn that he might as well confess if he actually did it. But where were they all in the afternoon?
Is that what you're planning to ask them?
Not all of them. Monica Height and Donald Martin I know about.
No, what about? So Monica Height did tell you something of interest last night?
Come on, Bartlett. Academia could be crumbling all around you.
Well, maybe he's not in his office.
There's one way to find out, isn't there? Dr. Bartlett. Oh. We seem to have caught him with his trousers down. Come on.
Should we really be doing this?
Use every psychological advantage you can, Lewis.
What? Oh, Inspector.
Sorry, are we barging in?
Yeah,
Just a couple of points to clear up, Dr. Bartlett. We won't take a minute.
Well, I do have a lunch shortly, but, yes, please, sit down.
Thank you. Well, the first thing is the fire drill on Friday. I assume you were responsible for calling it, yet you never mentioned it to myself or my sergeant here.
Nobody asked. The subject never came up. I didn't think it was important.
Seems to me that on the day a member of staff was murdered, everything would be important. I assume Quinn was present.
Yes, so far as we can check the list.
And we will. Secondly, this happy little family in which Donald Martin and Monica Height could spend the afternoon shagging each other silly. As a father figure, what was your view on that?
How do you find out?
It's my job to find things out. I'm a policeman. Well?
I think there are 1 or 2 other things you might need to know. I am in rather a rush right now, but I wonder, would you care to come round to my house this evening? I'm sure my wife could lay on dinner.
Very well. 8 o'clock?
Perfect. I'll look forward to it.
When did you discover that, sir? About Monica Height and Donald Martin? Was that what she had to tell you last night?
Amongst other things. Afternoon. 2, please. Oh, and I'll treat you to the hire of a costume, Lewis.
Me? No, but I don't want to...
Clears the mind wonderfully. I won't say it's a substitute for beer, but...
There you go, sir.
Thank you. Oh, yes, Corporation Brown. Very you, Lewis.
Yeah, but sir, I mean, even if you're right, even if Noakes and the supermarket woman were mistaken in identifying...
They were. I just need to work out why.
And if he was actually killed in the afternoon somewhere else than at his flat, well, the fact that Monica Height claims that she and Donald Martin were... I mean, it's hardly an alibi, is it? I mean, if she can threaten to spill the beans to his wife...
You've really got it in for her, haven't you, Lewis?
No, not at all, sir. But you have to admit that, objectively, the evidence looks damning.
You're saying that I'm not being objective?
Well, she is a very attractive woman.
And I am an overweight, middle-aged man. Well, I can hardly fault you there.
And perhaps if her daughter was taking exams that she wanted to...
Nice try, Lewis. But the syndicate only operates abroad, remember? And while Sally Height is resitting some GCSEs...
Sally?
Yes, I met her last night. I was in Monica Height's front room when you rang.
You were... Oh, I see.
No, Lewis, I don't think Monica Height would have lied to me about sleeping with Martin. If she hadn't. As you said yourself, Martin is something of a wimp. Can hardly be a very flattering admission for a woman.
Yeah, but if she needed to... if it was an alibi... Sir, wait a minute.
Lewis, please take a shower before entering the pool, right?
Sir, could I just make one final point?
Yeah, feel free. I gave you your head in this case, didn't I?
Well, yeah, let's accept that neither Donald Martin nor Monica Height poisoned Quinn. I mean, let's suppose Ogilvy has some misguided reason for wanting to falsely incriminate himself. That only leaves one member of the syndicate. And you've just accepted dinner at his house.
Now that, Lewis, is what I call a very good point. This afternoon, I want to speak to Ogilvy. And as you seem to have made telephone inquiries your own field of endeavour, I suggest that you check whether or when Quinn made that call to his old school. All right, are you ready?
For what, sir?
I'm feeling in rather good shape. What about a race to the far end? All right?
Go!
What?
Last Friday, during the day, I was here at the syndicate in the morning, then went down to the Oxford University Press to meet the chief printer, and got back about, 3:30, I should think.
After which?
After which I stayed until I left, at 4:45. You've caught me there. Guilty of skiving off the last 15 minutes. But there was nothing much happening.
And the secretary wasn't here keeping an eagle eye out?
Bartlett.
Would I be right in thinking you've been at the syndicate longer than Dr. Bartlett?
Indeed you would. About 5 years longer.
Would it be indelicate to ask why you are not the secretary and he is?
Not at all. He was voted in by the board. They thought him the better candidate.
You didn't resent that?
Of course I did. I still do. Question of what I can do about it, though, isn't it?
In all your years here, have you ever come across evidence of malpractice?
Naturally. Candidates take notes into examinations or copy from someone else. Happens 2 or 3 times a year. But the invigilators or the examiners pick it up. If you're stupid enough to need to cheat, you're normally stupid enough to be caught.
What about something slightly more systematic?
Expand?
Oh, local headmaster who revealed the papers to his pupils, or an examiner who simply upped the marks.
They'd be slitting their own throats. We have statistics going back years. Any sudden abnormality we'd pick up immediately.
Very well. What
if somebody at the very top was crooked?
Oh.
Yes, that would work. They could cover it up nicely. But it would have to be somebody at the centre, somebody here.
Mr. Ogleby, I'm going to be straight with you because I don't see any other way of putting this. You say you were here at the syndicate from 3:30 to 4:45 last Friday afternoon. But I have 2 witnesses who say that you weren't.
Really? How intriguing.
Yes, they say that there were no graduates in the building for at least half of that time.
Do they now?
So what's your answer?
My answer is that whoever your witnesses are, they must be lying.
Your car wasn't in the car park.
I didn't come by car on Friday. I only live in Walton Street. It isn't far away.
But the witnesses
are mistaken. Oh, dear. Have I made your life difficult, Inspector?
Well, I'm prepared to leave it there for the moment. Just one more thing. What was the concert you listened to in the evening?
Chamber music. 2 of Beethoven's late string quartets in E and A minor. Do you know them?
Yes. Yes, they're amongst my favourites.
Listen to me. You have no option. I told you, anyone who comes too close will have to be got rid of. Anyone. You have absolutely no alternative.
Well, that was an excellent meal, Mrs. Bartlett. Very kind of you to have me around, particularly at such short notice.
Oh, not at all. Would you like a coffee? Inspector?
What? Sorry? I've been doing a bit of swimming lately. I think my ears are getting a bit blocked up.
I said, would you like a coffee?
Yes, that would be lovely, thank you.
I'll leave you together for a moment.
Quinn, you know, could be quite comical about his mishearings. The pub near the syndicate, the Horse and Trumpet, he thought we called it the Awesome Strumpet.
Well, it really must have taken a lot of courage to go through life as he did.
Yes, which is why I don't want you to get the wrong end of the stick. It's true that none of us was close to him, but I at least valued Quinn a great deal.
Even if you didn't want to employ him in the first place? Well, that's what Dr. Roop told me.
Roop? That bearded hippie.
Roop? Ogleby? Seems you're not entirely popular at the syndicate, Dr. Bartlett.
I'm not there to win friends. I'm in charge. I keep a tight ship, and that doesn't always endear you to people.
Doesn't always mean you can trust them to get on with their work, either. I mean, for instance, when you were away on Friday afternoon, where were you, by the way?
Addressing a headmasters' conference in Banbury. One of the more trying aspects of the job is that one is thought to be fair game for anyone wanting a talk on examination systems.
And you came straight home from there?
That's right.
Tell me, Dr. Bartlett, why did you need to appoint Nicholas Quinn to the syndicate in the first place?
Because his predecessor had left.
That would be George Bland.
Yes.
Why did Bland leave the syndicate?
In search of pastures new.
Would those pastures by any chance have been in Al-Jamara?
How much do you know, Inspector?
Well, that depends on how much there is to know, doesn't it? And I got a feeling that you invited me here this evening to give me something of the overall picture.
I have no proof of this, you understand. But I have reason to suspect that George Bland was, and perhaps had been for some years, undermining the work of the syndicate in the Middle East. In Al-Jamara in particular. He may have felt he was near discovery, and that's why he fled. I'm not sure.
You never went to the police?
I had no proof, as I say.
And you didn't want to damage the precious reputation of the syndicate by a public scandal?
That I am guilty of, yes.
Well, what would you say if I told you that Quinn had unearthed absolute proof of Bland's corruption, and that was why he was killed?
I'm afraid I would not be at all surprised. It struck me from the first as a possibility. Inspector, you cannot possibly understand what it has cost me to bear this alone. The thought that Bland may have returned, perhaps only for a couple of hours, killed Quinn, and then flown back to Al-Jamara.
You didn't have to bear it alone.
We have no extradition treaty with Al-Jamara. I checked that. Bland is untouchable. Justice cannot possibly be done. In the circumstances, it seemed to me that the reputation of the syndicate, and, in a way, of Britain as a whole, ought to be upheld.
Well, it's a very old-fashioned way of looking at things, Dr. Bartlett.
Perhaps, but it's my way.
Then I can only say it's perhaps just as well that you're wrong.
About what?
About George Bland. Oh, I don't doubt that he was involved in selling and then covering up examination passes, but I don't think he killed Quinn, though he may have ordered his death.
Well, then who?
You see, once Bland was safe in Al-Jamara, there'd be no need for violence if his scheme had come to an end. He'd only need Quinn out of the way if the traffic in exam passes was still going on, because Quinn had the evidence to blow it wide open. And if that traffic was continuing, Bland would need someone else of the syndicate to ensure that it ran smoothly.
I repeat my question. Who?
I'll get it.
I honestly can't be sure at the moment. As you said yourself, academics are not on the whole well paid. Money could have been an inducement for anyone. But I do know one thing. You won't be able to keep the evidence of corruption to yourself. It'll have to come out.
There's a board meeting of the syndicate tomorrow. Perhaps if you were to attend?
Of course.
It's for you, Inspector, Oxford City Police.
What? Oh, thank you.
Have you finished? Should I bring the coffee in now?
Moore's here, yeah.
Sorry?
Yes?
Oh, yes, I suppose so.
When? All right, I'll be right over. Thank you.
What's the matter, Inspector?
Some more tragic news, I'm afraid. It's Ogleby. He's been murdered.
Boss?
Yes? I'm sorry, sir. Got a bit of trouble with my...
He's through in his living room, and no prettier than the last one. Louis got here ahead of you.
Oh, sir.
Oh, my God. Who found him?
Someone not unknown to you, Morse. Monica Haidt.
What?
She had the key to his front door, apparently, sir.
Where is she now?
Radcliffe Hospital. Shock. The press are going to have a field day with this. Get onto it, Morse. And skip the philandering in favour of a result, would you?
Come on, then, Doc. Give me the details.
Hit with this poker, probably while he was bending over the fire. The blow smashed through the cranium into the brain, which is what you can see.
Yes, thank you very much. Whoever did it would have needed a fair amount of strength, then.
Not necessarily, if you swung the poker the right way.
Are there prints on the poker?
None at all, sir.
Well, there's a surprise. Ogleby. He may have been obstructive, he may have been an outright liar for all I know, but we did have something in common.
What was that, sir?
Music, written by a deaf man. You had a look around the house?
Yeah, a brief one, sir. No clues to anyone's presence apart from Miss Hyatt.
What on earth was she
But there is
doing?
something else of interest. This was on the bedside table upstairs. I wouldn't have thought twice about it, except it's not the sort of thing you'd usually read to send yourself to sleep.
Medical toxicology. Well, I suppose if chemistry was one of his specialities...
All right, sir, but it's slightly more than that. There's a slip of paper marking one of the pages. If you turn to it...
Hang on, H-I...
The left-hand page, sir.
Hydrocyanic acid.
When he talked about cyanide, he could quote chapter and verse. He'd been reading up on the subject. But, of course, if he really did poison Quinn, that doesn't answer the question of why. Except that, well, if you look at the piece of paper that was actually marking a page, there's the strangest thing of all.
What on earth?
No, I don't get it either, sir. But it's an exact copy, isn't it? I've got the original here. 102, rear lounge. Even the admission number's the same. 93550.
But why or how would Ogleby want to make a sketch of a cinema ticket belonging to Quinn? Why or how? Or maybe once more, Lewis, we should be asking ourselves the fundamental question of when.
She's in here, Inspector. I'll have to ask you not to be too long.
Very well.
Hello.
I thought you were asleep.
Resting. Somehow I could tell it was you. Sit down.
Okay.
I think it's the smell. That jacket again. You've worn it in too many pubs.
Quite a few, that's for sure. Well, how are you feeling?
Shaky. I thought he must have had a heart attack or something. I knelt down, touched his shoulder, and that's when I saw.
Why were you there?
I suppose I should have told you. I was helping to look after him.
I'm sorry? What did you say?
I was helping to look after him.
And what does that mean?
He was dying. Blood disease. He probably had less than a year. That's what the doctors said.
Did you go to see him often?
When I could. Well, there was nothing like... They just liked to talk.
Yeah, brother and sister.
I suppose so, yes. I don't know whether I made his life easier or not. I hope I did. At one point, when he couldn't face the weight, he was talking of killing himself.
Did he say how?
No. But I had the impression he'd decided on a fail-safe method. And given that he was a chemist...
Poison? Cyanide?
I really don't know. Who could have killed him? It was so brutal.
You didn't see anyone else?
No.
I never know quite whether to believe you, Monica.
Oh, that's the first time you've used my Christian name.
Did you hear me?
Yes.
Yesterday evening, when you first said you'd finished with Donald Martin, I assumed you meant a while ago. And then you said it was Friday afternoon and that you'd made love at your house just to make sure there were no recriminations on either side. And when we were there together, I got the impression that if Sally hadn't been home...
Yes. I am attracted to you, if that's what you mean.
And I am to you. But in the same bed that Donald Martin had been in less than a week before.
Supposing that wasn't the case.
But it was. Wasn't it? Well, you told me it was. Look, I have to go. Someone killed Quinn and Ogleby. And the way we're going, I'll end up with no suspects left.
Morse? What's your Christian name?
Goodbye, Monica.
She needs rest, and it's very late.
I'm worried about her, and she is my fiancée.
Well, I suppose in that case...
Hello, Martin.
Inspector?
I'm sure your fiancée will be very pleased to see you.
Inspector, you must understand. My wife and I... Well, for some years now, we haven't been together in a physical sense.
I can't hear you, Martin. I can't hear you at all. Supposing that wasn't the case. But that was the case, wasn't it? Always is the case. Oh my God, I never even saw it. Do yourself a favor, Morse. Accept the inevitable. You're getting old. You've missed your chances. If there ever were any. Oh, damn it. It's It's like someone leaning on a doorbell in the back of your head. Quinn had to live like this from birth to death. From the moment he was born to the moment... Of course. Of course.
Sorry, sir. Are you with me?
Intermittently. It's all this blackboard business.
Well, there are no clear leads on Ogilby's death. He probably invited the killer in and turned his back, which meant he trusted them. But Martin says he was at home. Monica Height, as we know, discovered the corpse. And, well, you were with Bartlett, weren't you, sir?
So?
So I think our best bet is to carry on trying to crack Quinn's murder. This is the evidence for his movements on Friday, in reverse order. Shopped in the supermarket at 6, left a note for the cleaner at 5:30, drove away from the syndicate around 5 o'clock.
Studio 2, what's that?
Ah, a little piece of intuition on my part, sir. The cinema ticket. It doesn't read 102 at all, but the last half of Studio 2. That's the cinema in Walton Street. There's a line in what you might call, adult films.
Yes, I know it, by reputation. Go on.
Well, while you were at the hospital, I went and checked Quinn's ticket. Just as far as the lobby, I should say. That number was issued last Friday afternoon for the 1:30 showing.
Good work. Showing of what?
The Nymphomaniac from the North with Inga Nielsen, sir. Now, that might account for him leaving his car and his anorak at the syndicate while he sloped off.
What might?
Well, I mean, he'd hardly want everyone to know he went there, would he? At any rate, that fills in the early part of the afternoon. Lunch is a blank at the moment, but I called the Frederick Delius School in Bradford, and yes, Quinn did phone there at 12:20.
What did he want?
Well, to talk to one or two of the staff about becoming part-time examiners. But there weren't any available, so he left a message with the school secretary.
And before that?
The fire drill at 12. His name was ticked off on the list, all right.
Yes, of course it was. It all fits, doesn't it?
In what way, sir?
How, why, where, and when. And as for who... Look, Lewis, just how deaf was Quinn?
Well, it's funny you should mention that, sir, because I asked the school secretary. Very deaf indeed, apparently.
Almost run over by a car, so the publican told me.
Well, the secretary said that if you spoke very close to his better ear, the one with a hearing aid, he could pick it up. So he could manage some phone work. Most of the rest of the time he relied on lip reading.
Yes, of course he'd have to.
At which he was something of an expert, so she said. Now, as to the gaps in this list...
Wait a minute. How did the school secretary know it was Quinn on the line?
Well, because he said who he was, and she recognised his voice.
Lewis, if you'd worked in a school, you'd know that 12:20 is a hopeless time to ring and get hold of any of the teachers. Classes never finish before 12:30.
Well, maybe he couldn't ring later.
She recognised his voice. What does that mean? Over the phone, everyone's voice is distorted. You don't get all the registers.
Yeah, but...
Don't interrupt me, Lewis. Now, your woman at the supermarket, she recalled Quinn. How?
By his hearing aid, the anorak.
The accent, you said.
That's right, yeah, and the beard.
The beard. That's it. That is it. And what did he buy?
Well, I'm not sure, but when I did the inventory, the fridge held 2 steaks, a chilled pudding, 2 packets of butter.
2 packets of butter. Was he planning death by cholesterol poisoning or what? Even if he was expecting a guest, 2 packets of butter, Lewis. Can you see it, Lewis?
Well, I'm afraid I can't, sir.
And the note on his desk, you remember that? What do you think it read? Gone to see a dirty movie?
Well, I don't...
Lewis, you have been brilliant.
Have I?
In a completely unintentional way, of course. Come on.
Where are we going?
To take in a little higher education.
Oh.
Purification controls for inorganic elements and compounds also differ from normal industrial chemical controls. Industrial zinc oxide, for example, may contain 10% impurities, including traces of lead. Pharmaceutical zinc oxide must be 99% pure, with, as you might imagine, no lead whatsoever. Okay, so it's 11 o'clock on Thursday for the next lecture. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Okay.
Well, you're a popular lecturer, Dr. Roop.
I hope so. It's what the university employs me for. Are you coming to the board meeting of the syndicate this afternoon?
Yes, I think I am, but I wanted a quick word with you first, as a matter of fact.
What about?
When I say word, I mean words. Dr. Charles Roop, I'm arresting you in connection with the murder of Nicholas Quinn. Take his arm, will you, Lewis?
This way, sir.
Well, you had some luck in this business, Roop, but you distinctly overplayed your hand. Not in coming forward to volunteer information. That was a nice touch, particularly since they were all facts I was bound to find out anyway. No, it was gilding the lily and the movement of Quinn's corpse that really gave you away.
You're making an awful fool of yourself, Inspector. That's all I've got to say.
I don't think so, Roop. Too much stacks up against you. Your accent and your beard, for a start. Yeah, they must have seemed like advantages at the time. Anyone who didn't know Quinn and heard him described as a bearded Yorkshireman might well have taken you for him. And if you were to wear his anorak and his hearing aid...
Would you mind telling me who exactly I'm supposed to have been taking in?
The woman at the supermarket checkout, for one. Not, I think, that was part of the original plan, but once you got back to Quinn's flat with his body in the boot of his car and found that the cleaning lady was going to return, you had to do something. Something to convince her that Quinn was still alive until you could dump his body after she'd gone. Luckily, at the syndicate, you'd picked up the note from his desk, the note that may well have been there from the morning, and read, gone shopping, isn't that right, Lewis?
Yeah, just off shopping, shan't be long, NQ.
Exactly. And so you went to the supermarket and actually did some shopping, although you should have checked what Quinn already had in his fridge because the packet of butter was a mistake. Still, you fooled enough people into thinking Quinn was killed in the evening by a mysterious visitor. Certainly had Lewis going, didn't he, Lewis?
And why, tell me, am I supposed to have had Quinn's body in the boot of his car?
Because he was dead, of course. He'd been poisoned at some earlier point in the afternoon, before you arrived at the syndicate with that excuse about leaving some papers in Bartlett's office.
It wasn't an excuse. I left the papers in Bartlett's office.
Afterwards, you crossed the car park in the rain with Quinn's anorak on, thus convincing the caretaker you were him.
So I killed Nicholas Quinn?
Oh, is that a confession?
I helped Quinn get the job. I'd been friendly to him.
Of course you had. The fewer people likely to have had all their wits about them at the syndicate, the better for your purposes, or, I should say, yours and George Bland's purposes. Except that, unfortunately, Quinn had far more wit than he appeared to. Still, the fact that you befriended him meant that once he discovered Bland's corruption, he came and told you about it.
When exactly did I kill him, Inspector?
Well, you tell me.
No, you tell me. I've already said that I was in London all morning and came back to Oxford on the 3:15 train.
I only have your word for that.
No, you don't, Inspector. You may remember I said I took a taxi from the station.
Yes.
Might I use the phone a moment?
Well, it's a bit irregular, but, Lewis...
Interview broken at 11:33 a.m, DS Lewis. There you are, sir. Dial 9 for outside.
Well, it seems I may owe you an apology, Dr. Roop.
An apology? You were going to owe me a lot more than that, Inspector. You were going to owe me a substantial amount of damages for false arrest.
No need to shout, Dr. Roop.
No need to... Have you any idea what you're saying?
I'm sorry I didn't catch that.
I take it I'm free to go.
Yes, of course. I'm sure Sergeant Lewis will be happy to drive.
No, thank you very much. I've had quite enough of your hospitality for one day.
Oh, dear, sir. The Chief isn't going to like that.
You don't think the Chief is going to like this, do you, Lewis?
That's what
I don't believe he'll ever get to hear of it. Things are shaping up very nicely.
You mean you're convinced Roop was involved?
Oh, yeah. Everything I accused him of was true. Didn't you hear him lecturing? Industrial chemistry, if I'm not mistaken.
So he may have access to cyanide. But if you're right that Quinn was killed in the early afternoon, Roop couldn't have murdered him.
Did I accuse him of that? I arrested him in connection with the murder of Nicholas Quinn, that's all. And he was scared enough to confirm exactly what I needed to know, that he'd been in Bartlett's office that afternoon. And that's the confirmation that he had a helper.
Why don't I just listen, sir?
Look, no one man could have been responsible for the death of Nicholas Quinn. One man actually poisoned him, of course, in the way that I demonstrated. Invited Quinn into his office, asked him to help himself to a sherry, and that was that. And that same person could have got Quinn into the boot of his car. Quinn wasn't the heaviest of men.
What? Carry him out through the syndicate building to the car park without anyone noticing?
I thought you were listening, Lewis.
Sorry, sir.
I'll get to that in due course. The point is that once Quinn was stowed away, the actual killer could carry on with his daily life, while Roop, who had an alibi for the actual time of death, could set about inventing a new time of death, thus putting his fellow conspirator in the clear. It's ingenious, you've got to give them that.
Give who that, sir? Who was Roop's fellow conspirator?
Now you're asking me to spoil my little surprise, Lewis. All the board members here for the syndicate meeting. It'll be rather a dramatic moment, I should think.
It may seem odd to you all that I have decided to continue with this regular monthly meeting, given the events of the last week. However, I think, in the first place, we must do whatever we can to ensure that the Foreign Examination Syndicate continues its valuable work. There is, however, another reason why I wanted you here today, and that is why Inspector Morse and his sergeant have joined us. It's come to his and my attention that there have been certain irregularities in the syndicate's dealings with the Middle East, in particular with Al-Jamara. Now, I think he should take over. Inspector?
Thank you, Dr. Bartlett. Yes, it is true that I was going to speak of the fixing of examination results in general and the role of one or two individuals in particular. I note with interest that Dr. Roop is not here, although he had planned to come. Well, it doesn't matter. We'll run him to ground. There is, however, more important business on hand, and I must apologize to Dr. Bartlett for not taking quite the line he expected. Also for putting him under some rather unexpected peer pressure.
I'm not sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, you all knew Nicholas Quinn. Between you, despite some objections, you appointed him. And I've no doubt that you have, each and every one of you, been speculating about his death. Well, you need speculate no more, because I'm now in a position to reveal every unpleasant detail of it. Moreover, to tell you, within 60 seconds, the actual time of it. Lewis?
Sir?
Dr. Bartlett, I imagine it's well known that you got on with neither Dr. Roop nor Mr. Ogleby.
Well, yes, I suppose so.
One of those enmities was real. Ogleby had every reason to be envious of the Secretary's success. The other, I have to say, was a fiction.
What?
A cover. A blind. Is it true, Dr. Bartlett, that you called a fire drill for 12 noon last Friday?
Yes.
Yeah. It was during that fire drill, ladies and gentlemen, at exactly the moment the bell was ringing and everyone was scurrying down corridors towards the front of the building, that Quinn was killed. And why at that precise moment? Because the killer had planned it that way. Because Quinn could not hear the bell, nor all the movement outside Dr. Bartlett's office.
My office?
He sipped the sherry which had been offered to him, and he died. And then, while everyone was standing miserably in the rain outside the front of the building, Quinn's body was carried to his car at the rear. The killer then rejoined the others and ensured that his own and Quinn's name was ticked off on the list. The rest I won't bore you with, ladies and gentlemen, because I think what you all want to know is who that killer was. But I think I've left it reasonably clear, haven't I?
Me? But, Inspector, you can't...
You knew there'd been corruption, didn't you? But you didn't want to investigate it.
The reputation of the syndicate...
And Ogleby was onto you, wasn't he? Can you deny that? Ogleby was convinced you were at the centre of the cover-up.
Yes, very well. Ogleby had a fixation.
And why? Because Nicholas Quinn had confided in him, had given him the evidence which implicated you directly. Not the letter to George Bland, but something else. Something he'd overheard, or, in his case, overseen. Is that not right?
Inspector, ladies and gentlemen, I'm trying to be as honest with you as I can. Yes, Philip Ogleby did accuse me of corruption. And, yes, it was because of something Quinn had seen. Or rather, lip-read. But I can only say they were wrong. Both of them.
Then I suggest you say that down at the station, Dr. Bartlett. And we'll put it on paper and you can sign it. And if a jury believes you, it'll all be torn up and forgotten. The reception, or jamboree, that the syndicate gave for the education department of Al-Jamara. That's where it happened. Bartlett admits as much. Quinn looked across a crowded room and saw one of the sheikhs mouth Bartlett's name and specify a payment. Shocked, Quinn then told Ogleby what he'd seen.
But Bartlett still denies he killed Quinn.
Oh, yes, says Quinn was mistaken. And Ogleby, of course, but it all fits together too neatly.
I have to say, sir, I still don't understand the whole business with the cinema ticket.
Now, that's where Roop and Bartlett really tried to be too clever for their own good. They were so determined to fill the whole of Quinn's last imaginary afternoon.
You don't think Quinn would have gone to see a film like that, sir?
Well, I don't see why not. After all, if the real thing was out of reach in the form of Monica Haidt... what was I saying, Liz?
The cinema, sir.
Yeah, cinema. Well, it obviously seemed a good way for Bartlett and Roop to fill in a couple of hours of Quinn's time, so Bartlett went and bought a ticket and Roop planted it in the waste paper bin for us to find.
And Ogilvy's copy?
Well, that's what implicates Bartlett up to the hilt. Bartlett had to go off to his conference, so he left the ticket on his desk for Roop to pick up when he dropped the notes in the office. Now, if you remember, Ogilvy swore he was in the syndicate building that afternoon when even the caretaker said none of the graduates was there.
Yes, sir.
Well, Ogilvy was telling the truth. He'd taken the opportunity of Bartlett's absence to search his office for evidence of corruption, and the only suspicious thing he found was the cinema ticket. Seemed to be there for a purpose, so he left it, but copied it.
And why didn't Roop see him when he came into the office?
Think about it, Lewis. Bartlett, as secretary, had a similar office to all the others, but he did have one privilege.
His own toilet.
Exactly. And that's where Ogilvy hid.
Well, he must have been pretty certain of what was going on.
Easy to say that with the benefit of hindsight. I should think it was pretty mystifying at the time. But he was determined to nail Bartlett somehow, and with his own resources, if it took him the rest of his days.
Which turned out to be fewer than he thought.
Indeed. Has Roop been picked up yet?
No word, but there's a message with all cars. I suppose most of these papers of Quinn's could go back to the syndicate. The ones we don't need as evidence.
There'll be plenty of room. The syndicate building isn't going to be exactly full. You could more or less draw a line through the headed paper.
Graduates, T. Bartlett, P. Ogilvy, M. Height, D. Martin, N. Quinn. Only the two of them left.
What did you say, Lewis?
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I said, only two of them left.
No, Dick, before that.
Well, I was reading the list.
Read it again.
Graduates, T. Bartlett...
No, stop. Look at me while you read. And speak at a normal level.
Yeah, but if your hearing's on...
Just do it, man.
Graduates, T. Bartlett, P. Ogilvy, M. Height, D. Martin, N. Quinn.
Lewis, go over by the door, take the list, and just mouth the names.
Whatever you say, sir.
All right. Go. And again. Oh, my God.
What, sir?
I've made the most appalling mistake, Lewis. We need to move quickly. Bartlett, Martin, Dr. Bartlett, Donald Martin. It's not just that they sound similar, it's that watching the lips you can't tell the difference at all. Everything I'd mapped out for Bartlett was true, except that it was Martin who did it all.
So Quinn was mistaken?
Left here, Lewis. If Martin isn't at the syndicate or at home, I'll place money on where we'll find him. God, what a conceited idiot I've been.
Yeah, I must say, it didn't quite seem in the secretary's character.
Bartlett had an almost blinkered dedication to building the syndicate up, not milking it for all it was worth. And left again.
Well, isn't this...
We're going to Monica Hyde's house. She'll be out of the hospital now, and I'll give you two guesses who brought her home. All that nonsense about finishing with a bang, as it were, last Friday.
Now that you mention that, sir...
And I could never have believed a word she said.
I've got a feeling there was yet another untruth. I meant to say something before, but what with Ogilvy's death... I don't think Martin and Monica Hyde could have slept together on Friday, sir.
What?
Well, if Monica's daughter was retaking exams, she'd probably have been at home last Friday revising.
Good God, yes. Monica tried to tell me that. What if it weren't the case?
Though exactly why she should lie about that as well.
Martin had told her to lie to cover up what they'd actually done. Gone to a dirty movie. Is that where I've been going wrong with women all my life, do you think, Nurse?
I really couldn't say so.
Anyway, they'll be making up for lost time now. Pull up here and we'll give them the surprise of their lives. There's a side passage. I want you to ring the front doorbell.
Come on, open up, please.
Wait a minute.
Open the door, now.
What on earth is it, Sergeant?
Having a bath, were you, madam?
It's none of your business.
Mr. Martin, are you there? This is the Thames Valley Police and I have a warrant...
It's lies! Whatever Ruth's been telling you, it's all lies!
Out of my way, please, madam.
Get in his way! For once in your useless life, do something, woman!
All right, that's as far as you're going, Martin.
Oh, yes! You're a nasty bit of work, aren't you, Martin, eh? That's what happens if you resist arrest.
Well, cheers.
Cheers. How's the year, sir?
Oh, God, bloody painful, actually, Lewis. Just as well he didn't land another blow. Funny thing is, though, I can hear as clear as a bell again.
Oh, well, every cloud.
Yes, there's a few silver linings, aren't there? Bartlett was philosophical about my rush of blood to the head. We've landed Roop.
And there are no charges against Monica Haidt?
Well...
Still got a soft spot for us?
No. Well, that is... You can't help but feel sorry for her, can you? Falls for somebody like Martin, who turns out to be a double murderer. Hasn't the faintest idea how she was being used.
Well, there's nothing to stop you getting in touch with her at the syndicate.
No, Lewis. Love 'em and leave 'em. That's my motto.
Really, sir?
Yeah. Anyway, sup up.
Oh, we're not going on a pub crawl, are we, sir? Now that you've kicked the healthy life into touch?
Not for the moment, Lewis. Maybe a little later on. And there was another woman I had in mind seeing.
Another woman?
Yes, a Miss Inga Nielsen, I think the name was.
Miss Oh.
Do you care to join me?
I don't think
Come on, Lewis. Wife can hardly be jealous. It's only celluloid.
Well,
Come on, man.
Nee, min var bra. Ja, just det. Du måste inte stoppa.
What do you think, Lewis?
I'm not sure, sir. I'm having a bit of difficulty with the subtitles.
You what?
Colin Dexter's The Silent World of Nicholas Quinn, with John Shrapnel as Inspector Morse and Robert Glenister as Sergeant Lewis, starred Richard Pascoe as Dr. Bartlett, with Meg Davis as Monica Haidt and Stephen Critchlow as Donald Martin. Philip Ogleby was played by David Timpson. Dr. Roop and Chief Superintendent Strange, John Hartley. Sergeant Dixon, Lyndon Gregory, and Nicholas Quinn, Roger May. Other roles were played by Alex Rafai, Dennis Hawthorne, Geoffrey Whitehead, Jane Whittenshaw, Zulema Dean, Caroline Strong, Patience Tomlinson, Tracy Wiles, David Holt, Ahmed Mustafa, and Alice Arnold. The Silent World of Nicholas Quinn was dramatized by Guy Meredith. The director was Ned Shire.